Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the fire dragon of change in Avtar? Part 2. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. After Iroh was captured, the royal sloop had left the village resort. Though rather than returning to the Fire Nation with their prisoner, Naruto and Azula intended to fulfill the other part of their mission, locating and capturing the Avtar. With the High General also taking the chance to speak with Iroh once the sun began setting, wanting to speak to him about Azula. "So, what do you think?" Naruto asked, sitting in front of Iroh's cell, wanting to know what he thought of Azula's current state. "I see what you meant now. Azula truly believes that the only thing she's ever had or fear, Ozai's favor in being a firebending prodigy. Now she thinks in just a few short days, she's lost all three, and I can see it's affecting her firebending as well," said Iroh, having seen how Azula's flames were no longer blue nor as strong when they hit him. "I know, she can't even create lightning anymore. Though, I was able to get through to her a little the other night, talking to her about some of my own failures and about my training. I didn't tell her anything about who trained me, but I did try getting her to understand what firebending truly is," said Naruto, assuring Iroh he didn't say anything about the Sun Warriors nor Ran and Shaw. "Did it work?" questioned Iroh, knowing how ingrained it is in the Fire Nation, the belief that firebending is fueled by rage, hatred and anger, forgetting what it originally was. For a moment it did, her fire even turned blue again for a brief moment. "But I'm guessing it'll take longer to really get through to her, with how long she's believed firebending is used only for destruction. I was even hoping that once she starts opening up more, she'd be able to learn it personally from them." Naruto replied, surprising Iroh that he'd actually consider taking Azula to learn from Ran and Shaw. "That may work, but something to do when you are absolutely sure she has a chance at passing their judgment. I'm afraid as she is now, my niece would most definitely be devoured. I believe the best thing to do is to find ways to help her open up, ways that will make Azula care or at least feel something besides anger and hate," Iroh said, thinking it'd be a good start in getting Azula to open up more first. "That's not going to be easy, it seems like Azula wants to care or feel something, but she doesn't know how. The only thing she's known are anger, fear and cruelty, that's what she believes makes her strong while actually caring about someone is a weakness," said Naruto, something the Dragon of the West couldn't deny, aware how his brother viewed such things and would have passed those views on to Azula. "Then perhaps the solution isn't to make Azula open up, it's to find those that genuinely care for her. Which is a rather short list, unfortunately," Iroh replied, knowing the amount of people that genuinely cared about Azula could be counted on one hand. "Any ideas on who I'd be able to find? Possibly those that wouldn't make her suspicious," Naruto said, since he didn't want to risk Azula closing herself off if she thought she was being manipulated by suddenly bringing in people she knew. "I believe I can think of a couple," stated Iroh, aware of people like that, specifically two that Azula knew quite well. Later with Azula. Azula hadn't moved from her spot on the bed since returning from speaking with her uncle, not even saying anything when Naruto said he was leaving. The Fire Princess still trying to sort through her scattered emotions and thoughts. Before she looked at the door when she heard someone knocking at it, much to her annoyance as she sat up, only to see Naruto come in. "Why do you waste time knocking? This is now your room as well," said Azula in annoyance that he'd knock when they share a room now. "Just making sure you were decent, since I doubt either of us would want a repeat of last time," Naruto replied, making the Ravenet look away with a light blush at the reminder of her walking in on him in just a towel. "Fine. What do you want?" Azula demanded, doubting he'd come back here unless he wanted something or wanted to try talking to her again. "I came by to inform you that we have a meeting to attend right now," said Naruto, with Azula looking at him with a raised brow. "Why exactly would you need me to attend a meeting with you? In case you forgot, you're in charge of the ship and mission now," retorted Azula, looking away and crossing her arms. "Because I would like it if my second in command was with me and would be able to offer her own suggestions, if she has any," Naruto said, the Fire Princess's head snapping towards him in shock, not expecting him to want her to be his second in command. What?" Azula said in disbelief, not sure if this was a trick or not. "By second in command, I would like it if you were there with me, Azula. Along with any future meetings, since I'm sure you'll have your own ideas on how to track down the Avtar, as well as being a good way for you to gain military experience. So let's go," replied Naruto, motioning Azula to follow him, snapping her out of her shock as she got up and exited the room. "Well then, who else will be attending this meeting?" questioned Azula, wanting to know who else will be in attendance. "Some of the soldiers under my command. Since you'll be my second in command, it'll be good for you to get familiarized with those you'll be working with and giving orders to when I'm not around," Naruto said, with the Ravenet nodding, a little intrigued at learning more about the soldiers he commands. Only being able to guess that with who they served under, then Naruto's soldiers must be powerful ones. With it not taking long before they arrived at the war room, with Azula seeing at least 24 soldiers, possibly more than that. Though she frowned when she didn't see any Imperial firebenders present or that idiot captain. The latter she's actually thankful for, as Azula was still contemplating whether or not to incinerate him for his screw-up. Where are the Imperial firebenders? Azula asked, looking at Naruto, having thought some of them would be present since they were the guards of the royal family. I relieved them of their duty and sent them back to the Fire Nation, since the actions of their captain has made me question their competency and capabilities. And I'd personally prefer not taking the risk of that idiot not being able to think before he speaks again. Said Naruto, refusing to let the fool for a captain say something that'd ruin their mission again. But the royal procession. While on a ship currently heading towards the Fire Nation, the Imperial firebenders were all glaring at their captain's back, not believing they were dismissed because of him. With most of them considering throwing him overboard on their way home. All while the captain glanced back at them nervously, hoping he'd survive the trip back to the Fire Nation. Royal sloop. Fair enough. Azula muttered, seeing where he's coming from, and knew the royal procession would just be deadweight. Before she looked back at Naruto's soldiers, narrowing her eyes when she took a closer look at all of them. Seeing that while some of them were wearing the standard black and red Fire Army uniforms with the helmets and skull masks. Others were wearing modified uniforms that looked to provide them more freedom in moving and carrying different kinds of weapons, guessing they must be non-benders. Along with seeing a few wearing uniforms that were blue and red, and those wearing green and red uniforms. Why aren't they all wearing the standard uniforms? And why are they wearing different colors? Asked Azula, narrowing her eyes at the soldiers. I'm sure you can guess the ones with weapons are non-benders, while the ones in blue and green, they're benders just not firebenders. Unlike the rest of the Fire Army, I don't just have firebenders and non-benders under my command, I have earthbenders and waterbenders as well, though not many of the latter given the circumstances. Naruto revealed, much to Azula's shock that he actually had earthbenders and waterbenders under his command, before scoffing at the idea of it. Well, at least now I know why I've heard nothing about your division. If you actually waste time recruiting cannon fodder, muscle-headed fools that play in the mud, and more cannon fodder that's useless on land. Azula said in distaste at the idea of working with waterbenders and earthbenders, much to the anger of those she insulted. Because those guards you had were real top-notch firebenders, especially the captain that couldn't keep his mouth shut. Stated a non-bender. And how long has the Fire Nation been trying to take control of Ba Sing Se? 100 years now, I guess playing in the mud all day is better training than anything the Fire Nation has. An earthbender added with a smirk, getting a few laughs from the other soldiers. I'm sure Admiral Zhao would be able to teach them a thing or two. Oh wait, he's dead and at the bottom of the ocean, just like his entire fleet and everyone under his command. Said a waterbender tauntingly, with Azula being angered at their words and insults to the Fire Nation. Let's see how good your little toys are when they're burned to ash and melted slag. Or perhaps you'd like to see Omashu again, after that fool for a king surrendered his own city without a fight. Maybe see what's left of the Southern Water Tribe after the Fire Nation crushed them. Azula retorted, glaring at the soldiers, who returned the glares. Enough. Naruto shouted, causing all the soldiers to immediately stand up straight, with the blonde general looking at them with narrowed eyes. I won't have any of you wasting time arguing over petty squabbles or grudges. That includes you, Azula. Said Naruto, turning to his fiancée, who unconsciously stood straight and firm under his gaze. I've already told you all this before, but it seems you need to hear it again. I don't care what nation you hail from, I don't care if you're a bender or non-bender, I don't care if you're a nobleman or a commoner. What I care about are your actions and proving what you can do. Non-bender, firebender, waterbender, earthbender, or even airbenders if we miraculously enough find and recruit some, none of it matters on the battlefield. You train together, you rest together, you fight together, and you watch each other's backs. If you have problems with each other then you settle them during training, otherwise I expect you all to act like everyone else you fight alongside, one unit, one group of people, one nation. Am I understood? Naruto demanded, looking over the soldiers. Sir, yes sir. Said all the soldiers, making the whiskered firebender nod before he turned back to Azula. And you, I also don't care what prejudice or feelings you have towards anyone else, but you will treat everyone here with respect. Every soldier's under my command, whether they originally hailed from the Fire Nation or not, whether they're firebenders or not, they fight and protect each other. They would die for each other if it came to it, because they know it doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. They've all proven time and again they're loyal and I trust each and every one of them with my own life. So, I expect you to respect them. If you have any issues then you'll bring them to me, if you want to whine and complain about where they come from or who they are, then you'll stay quiet, because no one here will put up with childish insults or taunts. Is that clear? Naruto said, with Azula looking at him with wide eyes, not expecting to see such a stern side from her fiancé. Along with seeing how none of the soldiers looked upset about being talked down to, some even looked ashamed of themselves for their behavior. Being taken aback at the effect he had on those under his command, seeing he wasn't just a powerful firebender, but also had the charisma and resolve needed to lead. Yes, it's clear. Azula said, nodding in response, with Naruto nodding as well. Good. Now then, the reason for this meeting is that we'll be adding some new members to our forces to hunt and capture the Avatar, said Naruto, causing Azula's mood to turn to annoyance. I don't see why we'd need any more help, it seems like we have all that we need to find the Avatar, said Azula, doubting they'd need any help in capturing the Avatar given Naruto's abilities and the soldiers under his command, they'd likely be able to capture the Avatar without any problems. Well, it doesn't hurt to be completely prepared. Especially since we're dealing with an airbender, which no one has ever fought before in the past 100 years, that's not counting if he can access Avatar state at will. So, we'll be getting those that can track, incapacitate and capture the Avatar, while already having 3 recruits in mind. 2 of them are noblewomen from the Fire Nation, while the third is a bounty hunter that I've worked with in the past. The first 2 are called Mai and Ty Lee, while the bounty hunter is named June. Naruto explained, with Azula's head snapping towards him with a shocked expression at hearing Mai's and Ty Lee's names. Why these 3 specifically, General? Questioned a soldier, none of them being sure why these 3 were chosen. From the reports I've read on past encounters with the Avatar, he was evenly matched and taken down by the Yayan archers after they were employed by the late Admiral Zhao, with them even being able to incapacitate and capture him. I also plan to contact Colonel Shinu to have some of the Yayan archers added to our forces as well. And from what I've heard, Mai is an excellent markswoman herself, being skilled at using throwing knives and stilettos, which will make her a valuable addition, just like the Yayan archers. As for Ty Lee, she's an expert in hand-to-hand combat, specifically having the ability to Kai block and preventing benders from using their bending, which is also something that I'll expect everyone to learn, myself included. And for June, she's a skilled bounty hunter and has a Shirshu as a companion. For those that don't know, a Shirshu's sense of smell could track anything or anyone, no matter how far away they are, along with having saliva that can paralyze anyone they hit and can be made into Shirshu spit darts. Naruto explained, making the soldiers nod in understanding, seeing why the 3 were being recruited and that they would have useful skills and abilities. That's all for now. You're dismissed, said Naruto, ending the meeting as he went to leave, only to be stopped by Azula. How do you know about Mai and Ty Lee? Azula demanded, looking at him suspiciously, given how her only friends just happened to be chosen by him to help hunt down the Avatar, she thought he was up to something. I read up on the noble families and clans in the Fire Nations after joining the military academy, since I wanted to know everything I could in case I ever met any of them, with Mai's and Ty Lee's families being among them. Well, I learned about Ty Lee and her Kai blocking after researching different fighting styles that I could learn, should I ever be in a situation where I can't use my firebending, while learning about Kai blocking, and that she's a master at it with her knowledge of the human body and acrobatics. And Mai, I learned about her after Omashu was conquered and Governor Yukano was put in charge, learning about him and his family, should I ever end up in Omashu, with Mai's talent with throwing knives being something I wish to learn as well. Replied Naruto, having already come up with a convincing excuse as to how he knew about Mai and Ty Lee, as well as his decision to recruit them, with the Ravenet looking at him with narrowed eyes. And you had no idea I knew them? Said Azula, with the whiskered firebender shaking his head. No, this is the first I'm hearing that you knew them. But hopefully that'll make it easier to recruit them, if you're there. Naruto said before taking his leave with Azula watching him go. Before looking back at the soldiers, noticing how some of the female soldiers were giving her a stink eye, making Azula glare at them for a moment before turning her back to them. Brushing them off as the Ravenet took her leave, with the female soldiers leaving with a huff as well. Time skip 1 day. After docking the ship in the Fire Nation colonies, Naruto had sent out some soldiers to locate where June was, knowing she moved around a lot wherever there was a new bounty or money to be made. While he and Azula had gone to where they heard the Fire Nation Circus was setting up for their next show, which is where they would find Ty Lee. Arriving at the circus just as they were finishing setting everything up for the show they'd be performing tonight. Walking through the grounds, Naruto and Azula soon found Ty Lee in the middle of practicing her acrobatics, with the whiskered firebender also getting his first look at Ty Lee. Seeing she's the same age as Azula with fair skin, long brown hair and a braid at the top of her head and went down to the middle of her back, as well as brown-gray eyes. With her wearing gray-pink slippers, baggy, light pink pants that stopped just below her knees, a dark pink skirt divided into multiple pieces, a light pink crop top that exposed her midsection and baggy sleeves that stopped above her elbows, a dark pink shoulder cape, and dark pink wristbands. She's really good. Naruto thought, seeing how effortlessly Ty Lee was doing a handstand with just her index fingers, not looking the least bit tired or strained. Ty Lee, could that possibly be you? Said Azula at seeing her old friend again, with Ty Lee looking at her in surprise before smiling brightly. Azula. Ty Lee said before flipping back onto her feet, giving a twirl and bowing to the Fire Princess before running forward and hugging her. It is so good to see you. Said Ty Lee, happy to see her friend again, only to lose her smile when she felt something different about Azula. Please, don't let me interrupt your whatever it is you were doing. Azula said, only to see the brunette look at her in concern. Azula, are you alright? Your aura, it's so dull and empty. It's not the same bright blue it always is, it's just really blank now. Ty Lee said, along with seeing Azula's appearance was off as well, seeing her friend look like she hasn't been sleeping. I'm perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. Said Azula, snapping a little, making Ty Lee flinch slightly and frown. Are you sure? If something's wrong, I'd like it if I would be able to help Azula, we're friends after all. Besides, I don't like your aura like this, it looked much better before. So, is there anything I can help with? Questioned Ty Lee, shocking Azula at her concern and how genuine she sounded. I am fine like I said, I am perfectly fine. Your concern is appreciated but unnecessary. Azula replied while stepping away from Ty Lee, making her frown deepen before taking notice of Naruto. Ooh, I didn't know Azula was friends with such a cutie. Thought Ty Lee while admiring the handsome blonde. Hello there. I didn't know Azula would be bringing a friend, especially such a cute one. Ty Lee said with a flirtatious smile, surprising Naruto slightly at her forwardness. Yeah, it's nice to meet you too Ty Lee. Said Naruto, holding out his hand which Ty Lee shook, her smile growing as she felt his aura. Wow, you have such an amazing aura. It's like looking at a swirling rainbow of colors. The blue also looks so much like Azula's, being such a pretty color. But it also looks dangerous like Azula's, but in a good way. Said Ty Lee. Yes, wonderful. Anyway, Ty Lee, this is General Naruto of the Fire Army, he's also my betrothed. Azula said, surprising Ty Lee at learning who he was, having heard of General Naruto, the up-and-coming famous High General, the youngest in Fire Nation history. Wow, and Azula gets to marry him, she's so lucky. Ty Lee thought, not believing her friend was getting the chance to marry Naruto. Before her moment of awe and initial reaction turned to wariness, given how Azula seemed upset about referring to him as her fiancé. Wondering if he had something to do with the state she's now in. Oh, that's nice to hear. What do you think of Azula, Naruto? And how did you two become engaged? Ty Lee asked, wanting to see if he was hurting her friend in any way. Do you have somewhere private we can talk? Said Azula, preferring if no one overheard what was said. Looking between them for a few moments, Ty Lee nodded before taking them to her dressing room, where they all sat down. So, what happened? Questioned Ty Lee, wanting to know what's happened to her friend to make her like this. With Naruto and Azula telling her everything that happened, mostly Naruto whenever Azula got too upset to speak. The High General not leaving out any part, including his own hand in pushing Azula, with the Ravenet also reluctantly telling Ty Lee about her deteriorating firebending. Finishing it by telling the brunette about their intentions for finding her, to help hunt down the Avatar. I see, a lot's really happened the past few days. Ty Lee muttered, shocked at how much Azula's been through in just a few days. Yes, a lot has happened. Now will you come with us or not? Demanded Azula, not liking to talk about what's happened, especially with her firebending not working right anymore. Ty Lee looked between for a few moments before looking at Naruto, unable to actually blame him for what's happened, despite how he pushed Azula, seeing that he did feel bad and wanted to make it up to her. But for the first time in her life, Ty Lee found herself holding a grudge against someone, blaming Fire Lord Azai for hurting Azula like this. With her getting up and going over to hug Azula, surprising the Fire Princess at the sudden action. Before I answer that, I just want you to know how sorry I am that I wasn't around to help, Azula. But this time, I promise I'll always be there for you, no matter what, and I don't plan on leaving you again. Said Ty Lee smiling at Azula, who looked at her in shock as she definitely wasn't expecting that. I need to go. Azula said, before quickly getting up and leaving the tent, not knowing how she was supposed to respond to such things. While Naruto and Ty Lee watched her leave in concern before they turned to each other. I'll go with you both, I guess it's time for a career change, anyway. But would both of you be able to at least stay for tonight's show, since it'll be my last show and I'd really like Azula to see it. Ty Lee said, hoping they'll be able to stay for her last show. I don't think there'll be a problem staying for one night. Replied Naruto with a smile, making the Kai blocker smile brightly that they'll stay for the show, while planning to talk to Shizumu about making a few changes to her performance. Later. Why are we wasting our time here, still? Ty Lee's already agreed to help us, we should just leave rather than continue wasting time on this nonsense. said Azula, annoyed that they were now stuck having to see the performance tonight instead of continuing on their way to hunt down the Avatar. We're staying because Ty Lee wants us to see her perform at least once. And you should take the opportunity to relax and enjoy yourself, you may even like the show. Naruto replied, with Azula crossing her arms stubbornly. Relaxing is for fools that aren't trying their best, and I'll enjoy myself once we start hunting down the Avatar. Which we should be doing right now. Azula retorted, making Naruto look at her with a raised brow. You really need to get a hobby. Have you tried flower pressing? I hear girls like that. Naruto said with a smirk, with the fire princess glaring at him blankly. I will burn you. Growled Azula, holding up 2 fingers to shoot a fireball at him. Unless your hobby is practicing your smirk in the mirror. That would explain why you seem to take so long in the bathroom, you want to get it just right. Naruto said teasingly, with a ravenette growl lowly. If you don't stop pushing me, I swear I will burn that insolent tongue from your head. Said Azula, swearing to make him regret his teasing, only for Naruto to turn serious. Azula, whether we like it or not, we are going to be married. It'd be best if we try to make this work as best as we can. This could even be considered our first date. Said Naruto, regardless of whether they liked it or not, they were going to get married, and it would be best to see if they could at least see if they can develop genuine feelings for each other. I'd sooner listen to my senile uncle ramble on about tea all day. Azula retorted in annoyance, not liking the idea, especially the date part. But fine. Since you're so insistent, we'll stay for the stupid show, then we're leaving right after. Added Azula, relenting to watch the performance just so they can hurry up and leave once it's over. Later. Naruto and Azula sat in a high box seat as the stands were filled with people eager for the show to beginning. With performers in dragon costumes soon appearing and dancing around the main ring until the ringmaster Shizumu arrived, while the costumes performers shot flames out of the dragons' mouths around him, getting a cheer from the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to the show. Tonight we have a special treat for you all, and we are deeply honored to have Princess Azula and General Naruto as our guests tonight. Now let the performance begin. Declared Shizumu, releasing jets of fire into the air while many fireworks went off in the air, much to the crowd's enjoyment. Azula watched the show with a bored and annoyed expression as platypus bears came out rolling around on top of balls, plate jugglers threw around plates and caught them with ease, while acrobats leapt around before jumping on top of each other in a pyramid formation. Come on, aren't you enjoying the show? Naruto asked, smiling at the performance, with the ravenette giving him a side glance. It's doing an amazing job of putting me to sleep. Stated Azula, making Naruto roll his eyes before turning back to the show. Though the fire princess perked up when firebenders came and began throwing fireballs around, rolling them across their arms and shoulders as if they were balls. Juggled them around before throwing them into the air and exploded into rings that the acrobats jumped through. Even letting out a laugh when the platypus bears jumped through the fire rings, landing back on their balls, and continued rolling around. Before the firebenders grabbed several balls and began juggling them around, throwing them through the air towards each other. Until they threw the balls into the air and shot small flames at them, causing the balls to explode into a shower of colorful sparks, making the crowd cheer at the performance. But even Azula clapping with a smile on her face as she began forgetting about everything else and enjoying the show. They're not afraid, they're enjoying seeing firebending being used. And it's being used to entertain people to make them smile and laugh. Azula thought, looking around at seeing the entire crowd was enjoying the show, even more so when the firebenders came out. The ravenette also being shocked and awed at the sight, seeing firebending being used for entertainment, having never thought it could be used in such a way. Before she remembered Naruto's words on it, that firebending was energy, light and warmth, that it was beautiful. Only to shake her head at the thought. No, he was wrong, firebending is nothing like that. It represents power, domination, and control. Even this is still firebending, they're controlling these fools, making them forget what firebending is truly capable of by making it seem harmless and playful. He was wrong. Azula thought, refusing to believe that Naruto was right about what firebending was. Yet you were able to momentarily return your flames to being blue when you listened to him and considered his words. Maybe he was telling the truth. Said a traitorous part of her mind, making Azula frown before shaking her head and violently squashing that part of her. No. He was wrong, firebending is meant for destruction and control, that is what it truly is. Said Azula mentally, but despite her best efforts she could still feel it poking at the back of her mind. And now for the grand finale, in her final show with our circus. I give you, the magnificent Ty Lee. Shizumu announced, pulling Azula from her thoughts as the ringmaster motioned to the top of the tent, where Ty Lee was balancing on a tightrope with just one hand. Everyone watched in amazement as Ty Lee stayed perfectly balanced before switching to her other hand, only to be shocked when the brunette leaned forward and fell to the ground. with Ty Lee grabbing a trapeze bar when it swung close to her, jumping off at the height of the swing. Spinning through the air, Ty Lee hooked her legs around a second bar swinging towards her. Grabbing the bar, Ty Lee began spinning around as it swung through the air, ending with a one-handed handstand on it, much to the crowd's amazement as they cheered the performance. Though it didn't end there, as Ty Lee swung around the bar, letting go at the highest point. Flipping through the air, Ty Lee stuck her feet through 2 steel rings, performing a perfect splits before she began spinning around. With her feet not slipping out until she pulled one out and lifted her leg up, staying balanced in only one ring. Smiling at the crowd, Ty Lee leaned forward to fall out of the steel ring, grabbing both of them at the last second, flipping once before letting go and flying through the air. Grabbing the center support pillar of the tent, Ty Lee wrapped her legs around it, keeping her momentum going as she spun around it. Before falling back with her legs still wrapped around the pillar, grabbing it with her hand and unwrapping her legs, Ty Lee held her body out from the pillar, being completely vertical to it. The brunette then began scaling up the pillar with her hands, much to everyone's shock and awe. Once she was at the top, Ty Lee moved her body to begin spinning around the pillar, releasing it once she was going fast enough, flipping through the air and going through a ring made of fabric. Grabbing the fabric as it began unraveling towards the ground, with Ty Lee remaining wrapped in it. Though just before she could touch the ground, Ty Lee tugged on the cloth, causing it to go in reverse, taking her back into the air. With the Kai blocker jumping out of the cloth, flipping through the air before landing back on the tightrope perfectly balanced. Giving another smile, Ty Lee bowed to the crowd while still maintaining her balance, causing them to erupt into cheers at the spectacular and magical performance. Many believing she gave an even better show since it would be her final one. But Naruto and Azula saw the look the brunette gave them as she gave her bow. The show was for Azula. Later. After the show had ended, Naruto and Azula had gone to Ty Lee's tent, finding her inside and changed back into her regular attire. "What was that back there?" Azula said, narrowing her eyes the brunette, with Ty Lee smiling at her. "I think it was my best performance yet, a perfect one for my final show," replied Ty Lee, happy at how her performance turned out, especially with the changes she made to it. "Not that. The look. You looked at me and Naruto once it was finished." "What was that?" said Azula, wanting to know what it meant, as the brunette merely kept smiling and grabbed her hands. "Simple, I wanted to put on the best show I could for you, Azula. You're my best friend and I wanted to do something that could help you, even if it was just to take your mind off of everything that's happened. So, I did what I do best and gave you the greatest show I could do." What did you think of it?" Ty Lee asked, looking at Azula, wanting to know what she thought of the show. But the Fire Princess being shocked at this, that Ty Lee gave such a performance for her. Just to help her take her mind off of everything that's happened, to do something for her. It was amazing. You've certainly improved a lot since the last time I saw you, and no, not that it was that impressive. I mean, if you can do it, then I'm sure anyone with actual talent and skill would be able to do it easily." Azula replied before hastily adding the latter part, though Ty Lee smiled brightly and hugged Azula. "Ooh, I'm so happy you liked it. I wanted it to be my greatest performance. I'm really glad with how it turned out and that you liked it," said Ty Lee before pulling back to look at the Ravenette. "And I was serious before, from here on out, I'm going to be there for you, no matter what," Ty Lee added with a sincere smile, shocking Azula again that she was serious, would always be there for her, before she smiled slightly. "Thank you, Ty Lee. That really means a lot," said Azula, with Naruto and Ty Lee now being shocked that she actually thanked her. "You thanked me? You really thanked me?" Ty Lee squealed as she hugged Azula tightly, causing the Ravenette's eyes to widen at realizing what she just said. "This is so amazing. Ooh, I can feel my aura is so much brighter and pinker than ever. And I can see yours is brighter too, Azula," said Ty Lee, happy at being able to help her friend. "And you wanted to just leave. Do I get a thank you for convincing you to watch the show?" Naruto asked, with Azula quickly pushing Ty Lee away. "And no. Absolutely not. I did not thank you for anything, let alone for that stupid performance. And I didn't mean any of that nonsense, I just don't want to deal with you crying at how terrible it really was. And I still believe it was nothing but a waste of time," Azula said, shaking her head, refusing to let them think she was weak. "Ah, it's alright, Azula, next time it can be a private show for just us. That way you don't have to worry about letting anyone see you excited," said Ty Lee, smiling at her friend, who rapidly shook her head. "No. I would never waste my time on such things ever again. I only stayed because he insisted, otherwise I would have returned to the ship alone," retorted Azula, glaring at them both. "Don't worry, Azula, I'll make sure the second date is even better than this," Naruto said with a smirking, as the Fire Princess glared at him murderously before storming out of the tent. The sight making Naruto and Ty Lee laugh, glad that they were able to help her relax and enjoy herself a little. Later. Once Ty Lee had packed her belongings, the trio had returned to the royal sloop where they were greeted by some of Naruto's soldiers. "General, we managed to locate June, she's on the ship now," said a soldier, making Naruto nod in thanks before he, Azula and Ty Lee walked up the gangplank where they found June on deck. June had fair skin, long dark black hair that fell past her shoulders and covered the right side of her face, along with some being held in a topknot with a skull motif band, and gray-green eyes, along with 2 red tattoos on her shoulders, depicting snakes curling around themselves. With her attire consisting of black boots that went up to her knees and 3 small belts with gold buckles, 2 around her ankles and a third at the top of the boots, form-fitting black pants, a black kip-out dress with a red interior, and split down the sides with the back being longer than the front, 2 black belts with gold buckles wrapped around her midsection. And fingerless black gloves that went up past her elbows. With her also having dark maroon lipstick and blue eyeshadow around her eyes. And with her was her Shirshu Nyla. "June," Naruto said, making the bounty hunter look at him with a smirk. "About time you showed up, handsome, I was starting to get bored. You got another job for me or finally ready to take me up on my offer?" June asked as her smirk turned suggestive, making Azula narrow her eyes at the bounty hunter. "You were brought here for a job, nothing more," said Azula, with June turning to look at her, never once losing her smirk. "Huh, you know it's funny, you remind me of this angry little boy I ran into, you've both got that same nasty little scowl going for you," said June, seeing a resemblance between her and Zuko. "What? Wait, you don't mean Zuzu, do you?" Azula asked, realizing she meant Zuko, causing June to laugh at the nickname. "Zuzu ahahahahaha. Oh, that's rich, I'll have to remember that if I ever run into Angry Boy and Uncle Lazy again. Unless it's those 2 you want me to help track," June said after calming down, with Naruto shaking his head. "No, we already have one of them captured and Zuko can wait. We want your help to track and capture the Avatar, as well paying for your extended services," replied Naruto, making the woman smirk widen. "The Avatar? Short kid, carries a stick, covered in tattoos, kind of annoying. I've already dealt with him when Zuzu wanted me to track his girlfriend, little brat messed up Nyla's nose," said June, petting Nyla, who growled and shook his head at the reminder of all the perfume scents. "You want me to help catch him, it's not going to be cheap," June stated, looking at them, knowing the Avatar isn't a cheap target to hunt down. "We'll pay 3 times your usual price for tracking and locating him," Naruto offered. "You'll also be paid every other week you're here and assist us in anything outside of our mission," added Azula, knowing money wouldn't be an issue, with June thinking it over. "Make it I'm paid every week and I get to decide the price depending on the task I help you with. And striking the price for tracking the Avatar, I get a new whip, my own ship, and I get a room next to my pet Foxy there," said June with a wink at Naruto, who gulped at the last request, while Azula scowled. That's doable, but why the room?" Naruto asked, with June walking up to him, dragging a finger along his chest. "Well, I'd ask to sleep in your room with you, but you know how I prefer the chase, and I always get my prize. Besides, it'd be so much more fun if you came to me, Foxy," June said slyly and licked her lips slightly, making the High General blush at her actions, much to Azula's annoyance and slight jealousy. "You can have your whip and whatever ship you want. But you will not have a room anywhere near him," said Azula, pulling Naruto back, making the bounty smirk at her. "And who are you, angry girl? His girlfriend?" questioned June, causing the Fire Princess to blush in embarrassment before quickly shaking her head. No. I would never be this fool's girlfriend. But I am his fiancé, though only because it was arranged," Azula said, making June's smirk widen before she grabbed Naruto's arm and pulled towards her. "If that's the case, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if we had a little affair. I made sure Foxy knew I'm ready whenever he is," June said, giving Naruto a sly look before Azula pulled him back. "I would in fact mind. Even if I have no choice in the engagement, we are to be married. And I refuse to have my image sullied because my fiancé was tempted by anyone, let alone a lowly bounty hunter," Azula retorted while glaring at June, who merely looked at her in amusement. "Maybe we should continue the discussions in the morning," suggested Naruto, feeling they'd have clearer heads then. "Fine with me, Foxy, and when you're ready to have some fun, make sure your girlfriend doesn't know. I don't like being interrupted," June said, giving him one last wink before she and Nyla went into the ship, with Azula growling at her. "Ty Lee. You can have the room next to ours," said Azula to her friend before dragging the blonde firebender back to their quarters, refusing to let June in a room anywhere near hers and Naruto's. Though mentally, Azula was wondering why seeing June act that way with Naruto annoyed her so much. Before simply shaking her head, pushing it to the back her mind and instead continued heading back to their quarters, making a mental knot to make sure Naruto and June were never alone together. The journey was long and annoying, but now you get to see what it's really about. The destination. Sokka stated as he, Katara, Aang, Appa and Momo had made it through the Cave of Two Lovers. Having traveled through the cave in order to reach Omashu, so Aang would get the chance to learn earthbending from his old friend, King Bumi. All of them being relieved and happy to finally make it after having dealt with General Fong, then getting lost in the cave. With Aang also being happy at seeing his friend again and being able to learn earthbending from him. I present to you the Earth Kingdom city of O, said Sokka, holding his hand out to the city only for his eyes to widen, with Aang's and Katara's doing the same at the sight before them. Seeing the Fire Nation banner hanging from the gates of the city, buildings that look to be converted into factories releasing smoke into the air, metal bridges extending over the gorge, and what looked like a statue was being constructed at the very top of the city where the palace once was. Oh no, Sokka muttered in disbelief and despair at seeing Omashu has now fallen to the Fire Nation as well, with Aang walking forward with a shocked expression at what's happened. I can't believe it. I know the war has spread far, but Omashu always seemed untouchable, said Aang, not believing that Omashu's already fallen and is under the Fire Nation's control. Especially since they had been not too long ago, with the young Avtar starting to see just how far the war has spread across the Earth Kingdom. Up until now, it was. Now Ba Sing Se is the only great Earth Kingdom stronghold left, said Sokka while crossing his arms, knowing with Omashu conquered, Ba Sing Se was the only thing left keeping the Fire Nation from controlling the entire world. This is horrible, Katara stated, walking up to Aang, saddened at seeing the city under the Fire Nation's control, but also knew they couldn't do anything. But we have to move on, said Katara while turning towards Aang, knowing they needed to keep moving to find someone who can teach him earthbending, otherwise the Fire Nation will just keep gaining more and more power. No, I'm going in to find Bumi, Aang said, refusing to leave his friend behind as a prisoner in his own city, making Katara and Sokka look at him in surprise that he wanted to go into the city. Aang, stop. We don't even know if Bumi's still, Sokka said before stopping, not wanting to say it, since Bumi is one of Aang's oldest and still living friends, but he also doubted the Fire Nation would keep the king of Omashu alive. What? If he's still what, demanded Aang, looking at Sokka while knowing what he was going to say, but refused to believe his friend is dead. Stay around, replied Sokka while looking away unsurely. I know you had your heart set on Bumi, but there are other people who can teach you earthbending, Katara assured, believing there are plenty of other powerful earthbenders that can teach him. This isn't about finding a teacher. This is about finding my friend, Aang stated before turning back to the city, not caring if he never finds an earthbending master, only caring about finding and saving his friend. Later, waiting until the sun started going down so they wouldn't be spotted, Aang had Appa bring them down to one of the cliffsides of Omashu, where a tunnel was. A secret passage? Why didn't we just use this last time? Sokka asked in annoyance that Aang knew about a secret passage into the city, with the Avtar grunting as he tried prying the grating off with his staff. Before finally getting it under the grating and jerked it off, revealing it was full of sewage, much to Sokka's disgust. Does that answer your question? Asked Aang before flipping into the sewer tunnel, followed by Sokka and Katara. Moving up and through the sewer, Aang created an air ball with his staff to clear a path through the sewage, while Katara used her waterbending to maneuver the sewage around her. With Sokka being unable to do anything as he was continuously soaked in the sewage, while being further disgusted whenever it got in his mouth. Luckily, it wasn't long before they arrived at an exit, with Aang releasing a burst of air at the sewer grate to loosen it, looking around to see if anyone was around. Seeing the coast was clear, Aang moved the grate aside and jumped out, with Katara climbing up after him. That wasn't as bad as I thought, Katara stated, having expected it to be much worse besides the smell, before they heard a groaning coming from the tunnel. Looking, they saw Sokka climbing out, completely covered in sewage, making him look like a monster rising up. Before Katara spotted a barrel of water and bent the water, launching a stream of water at her brother that washed away all the sewage waste. With Aang swinging his staff, releasing a blast of wind that dried him off as well. Which also revealed 3 small purple creatures on him, 2 of which being stuck to his cheeks and a third on the back of his neck. Ah! They won't let go. Help! Sokka screamed as he tried prying the creatures off, only to panic when they wouldn't come off, before he was suddenly tackled by Aang into a wall. SHH. Stop making so much noise. It's just a purple Pentapox, Aang said to calm him down, with a non-bender looked at the Pentapoxes on his face in fear, feeling them sucking on his skin. But the Avtar grabbing one and lightly scratching its head, causing the Pentapox to remove its tentacles before Aang pulled it off, revealing red spots where its suckers were attached. Knowing how to remove them, Sokka hastily scratched the second one and pulled it off as well. Hey! Someone shouted as Aang went to remove the third from Sokka's neck, the trio looking only to see 3 Fire Nation guards coming towards them. Seeing this, Katara and Sokka quickly stood in front of Aang, while the airbender wrapped a cloth around his head to hide his arrow. What are you kids doing out past curfew? The lead guard demanded, narrowing his eyes at them suspiciously for being out this late. Sorry. We were just on our way home, replied Katara before they turned and began walking away to avoid being questioned further, only for the guard to see the red spots on Sokka's neck from the Pentapox. Wait, what's the matter with him? Said the guard, making the kid stop while Katara glanced at her brother's neck, thinking of an idea to get the guards to leave. He has Pentapox, sir. Katara said quickly, while turning Sokka around to show the other spots on his face, with the guard walking up to them, looking at Sokka closely before reaching to touch him to see if he was sick. It's highly contagious, added Katara, causing the guard to pull his hand back before stepping back when Sokka began groaning. Oh, it's so awful. I'm dying. Sokka groaned as if he was in complete pain while moving towards the guard, making him step back in fear. And deadly, Katara said, knowing that'll get them to leave, with the 3 guards now moving back, away from the sick and dying Sokka. Hey, I think I heard of Pentapox. Didn't your cousin Chang die of it? Said the guard while looking at another, making them all freak out as they kept backing away. We'd better go wash our hands and burn our clothes, the second guard said before they ran away to avoid being infected, with Sokka coughing a few times before dropping the act. Thank you, so we're friends, said Aang, smiling while scratching one of the Pentapoxes, knowing they now had a way to make sure the guard stayed away from them if they were spotted. Later. Moving through the city, Aang, Katara and Sokka, along with Momo who joined them after Appa found a place to land outside the city. With the 4 of them moving to a higher level of the city, seeing all the scaffolding set up everywhere as the stone was slowly being replaced by metal. Before they quickly hid behind a pile of metal bars as a guard patrol walked past them. Let's find Bumi and get out of here, Katara said, not wanting to stay here any longer than they needed to and risk being found, doubting they'd be able to make it out of the city in one piece with all the firebenders. Where would they be keeping him? Questioned Sokka, wondering where they'd even keep someone like Bumi, with how powerful he was and the entire city being made of stone for him to bend. Somewhere he can't earthbend. Somewhere made of metal. Aang replied, looking around the city, seeing any place that looked like it'd be where Bumi was being kept. The group kept moving to find anywhere that was made entirely out of metal and where it'd be impossible for Bumi to earthbend. While unknown to them, on the level just below were 3 people and 4 guards, 2 following behind them and 2 in front. With one of them being Michi, the wife of the new governor of Omashu, Yukano, and their 2-year-old son Tom being carried in her arms, while the third was their daughter Mai. Mai was a 15-year-old girl with fair skin, long black hair with some held in 2 small buns on either side of her head and 2 long strands that went over her shoulders, and tawny eyes. With her attire consisting of black, pointed shoes with the tips curving upward, a red robe with baggy sleeves, a black sash around her waist, a long maroon vest over it, and black fingerless gloves. There really is no fathoming the depths of my hatred for this place, Mai stated in her usual emotionless and bored tone, along with her expression not changing at all. Mai, your father was appointed governor. We're like royalty here. Be happy and enjoy it, said Michi, wondering why her daughter wasn't happy at having an entire city under their control, even better that it's one as important as Omashu. The group being unaware that 2 levels above them, several boulders were sitting in one of the mail delivery chutes, ready to be pushed down right towards them. With Mai rolling her eyes at her mother's words, finding it hard to enjoy being in a city where no one liked them, along with finding it boring and plain. I thought my life was boring in the Fire Nation, but this place is unbearably bleak. Nothing ever happens, said Mai, finding she hated that part the most, that nothing ever happened and all she could do was be the perfect well-behaved daughter of the governor. On the level above them, the Gong were walking past them completely unnoticed before they stopped when they heard what sounded like stones rolling across the ground. Looking around, Aang's eyes widened when he saw 2 boulders rolling down one of the chutes. Before spotting Mai and her mother walking past, knowing if nothing was done they'd be crushed. Not caring if they were from the Fire Nation, Aang didn't hesitate to swing his staff the moment the boulders rolled past him. Unleashing a powerful blast of air that shattered the boulders, saving them, but also alerting them to the sound. With the guards tensing and held up the lanterns to see what the noise was, seeing the dust cloud created from the destroyed boulders. While Mai narrowed her eyes and saw Aang standing on the ledge, with the Avtar glancing down at them, realizing he just blew their cover. The resistance, Michi said in worry, thinking it was an attack from the resistance, with Mai gaining a faint smile at now getting the chance to do something. Moving forward, Mai threw her hands out, launching multiple stilettos at Aang, who quickly jumped on top of a stack of wood, which the stilettos buried themselves into. With the Gong quickly running away to avoid being caught, while 2 of the guards climbed up the ladders to chase after them. Stopping for a moment, Katara pulled some water out of her pouch and launched it at the guards, throwing them off the ledge. While Mai was able to get up to them and rushed at Katara, holding her hand out and launching more stilettos at the waterbender. causing Katara to quickly move the water in front of her and freeze it, with the stilettos burying themselves within the shield of ice, with Katara running after Aang and Sokka as Mai jumped over the ice shield and continuing pursuing them. Running past a scaffolding, Aang waited until Katara reached them before urging her to keep running, then waited until Mai was close enough. Once the ravenet was, Aang spun in the air and swung his staff down at the scaffolding with a sweep of wind, causing it to come crashing down between him and Mai. Gritting her teeth at seeing the scaffolding come down, Mai slipped one of her double-sided knives into her hand and threw it, having the knife ricochet off the wall towards Aang. But the Avatar, hearing the impact and seeing the knife coming towards him, before he quickly started spinning his staff as the knife impaled it, much to his surprise at how close it came to his head. Looking back at Mai on the other side of the collapsed scaffolding, Aang readied himself as she threw more knives at the group. Only for the ground to suddenly slide open underneath Aang, Katara, and Sokka, causing them to fall into the hole, before it was then sealed up as Mai's knife stabbed into the ground. Well, so much for that. Mai thought, sighing in disappointment at the chase ending before turning back to go check on her mother and brother to make sure they're alright. With Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Momo. Meanwhile, the gong landed in an underground tunnel, holding their heads and feeling disoriented at the sudden drop. Before looking up to see themselves surrounded by citizens of Omashu and 3 soldiers standing in front of them, who looked ready to attack. "Whoa. Easy, we're on your side," Sokka said, holding his hands up only for the Earthbenders to glare at them. "Your actions say differently. You saved the governor's family when we were going to take them out," retorted the lead soldier, making Aang frown at him. "Of course I saved them. They were innocent people, and I wasn't just going to let them die," said Aang before raising his staff when the Earthbender stomped his foot on the ground, causing several rocks to shoot up into the air. "Then that just means you're siding with the Fire Nation," the soldier said, with the other Earthbenders getting to attack while Aang and Sokka got ready to defend themselves before Katara got between them. "Please, can we all just calm down? We are not with the Fire Nation. I'm Katara, this is my brother Sokka, and this Aang," said Katara, thinking they didn't know who they were if they were acting like this. "I know who you are," said the Earthbender, cutting her off before reluctantly lowering the rocks while motioning the other Earthbenders to do the same. "I'm Captain Young of Omashu's army and second in command of King Bumi, or at least I was until the Fire Nation captured the city. I've been working to expel them from Omashu, and we would have finally gotten an advantage against Governor Yukano by taking out his family if you hadn't interfered," Young said, narrowing his eyes at Aang, who flinched at the glare along with seeing how some of the other resistance members were looking at him. I couldn't just let them die, no matter who they are or where they came from," said Aang, only for Young to scoff before turning around and began walking down the tunnel. "Tell that to the people the Fire Nation are imprisoning for breaking their new laws, or those that can't even leave their homes anymore, with how they're basically turning the entire city into a giant prison. Make no mistake, I only had you 3 saved because of your friendship with King Bumi and how important the Avatar is to the war effort against the Fire Nation. Even if it seems you don't care to actually make an effort to strike back against them," retorted Young, making the Avatar flinch again at the accusations, not used to actually being hated like that, especially from those who support him. "Or used to, I guess," thought Aang, lowering his head, with Katara putting a hand on his shoulder before frowning at Young. "You can't blame Aang for wanting to help people, that's what the Avatar is supposed to do, and he has to master the other elements before he can do anything against the Fire Nation," Katara said in Aang's defense, with Sokka nodding in agreement. "Yeah, he's doing the best he can. And in case you haven't heard, he did help save the Northern Water Tribe and take out an entire fleet of Fire Nation ships," added Sokka, though mentally, he did somewhat agree with the resistance in wanting to drive the Fire Nation out of Omashu. If that meant needing to use a few dirty tactics, then maybe that's what was needed to get the job done if they were going to take down the Fire Nation. Though he didn't say it out loud, knowing how his sister and friend would react. "Oh, we've heard what happened, but it seems he's now refusing to utilize that same power to save Omashu as well, despite claiming to be a friend of King Bumi," Young retorted as they soon arrived in an underground cave filled with refugees they managed to save, with Aang flinching again. "So, is King Bumi with you guys? Is he leading the resistance?" questioned Aang, hoping to see a friendlier face here, only for the captain to clench his fists angrily. "Of course not. On the day of the invasion, we readied ourselves for battle. We were prepared to defend our city, to fight for our lives and for our freedom. But before we even had a chance, King Bumi surrendered," revealed Young, much to Aang's shock and concern that his friend would surrender without a fight. "The day of the invasion, I asked King Bumi what he wanted to do. He looked me in the eye and said I'm going to do nothing. Nothing. King Bumi chose to surrender himself and the city to the Fire Nation," Young said in anger at Bumi choosing to surrender and let himself be taken prisoner rather than try fighting. "It doesn't matter now, though. Fighting the Fire Nation is the only path to freedom. And if we die, then we'll make sure to take as many of them down with us," said Young, with the other resistance members nodding in agreement, making the Avatar lower his head sadly that they'd choose to die taking their enemies down with them, before perking up as he got an idea. "Actually, there's another path to freedom. You could leave Omashu. You're directing all your energy to fight the Fire Nation. But you're outnumbered. You can't win. Now's the time to retreat so you can live to fight another day," Aang said, knowing this way they'd be able to get out the city and better plan out how they'll fight the Fire Nation to take back Omashu. Hoping that even if they don't like him for thwarting their assassination attempt, they'd at least understand prioritizing the safety of the citizens over the city itself. "Absolutely not. You expect us to just abandon our home to let the Fire Nation win by driving us out?" demanded Young, angry at the idea of abandoning Omashu, with the other resistance members sharing his anger. "You already stopped us from damaging the governor's control over the city. Now you're trying to get us to leave," a resistance member said, also angry at Aang stopping their assassination attempt. "I bet the Avatar is working with the Fire Nation if he's so eager for us to just leave and let them take the city," said another resistance member. With Aang looking at them in shock and worry that they'd really refused to leave the city and think he was working with the Fire Nation. Flinching when he saw the refugees muttering amongst themselves, looking divided on the idea of getting to safety and refusing to leave Omashu. "Please. I don't want the Fire Nation here any more than any of you, but the important thing is making sure everyone is safe. You should at least want to get the civilians out of here so nothing happens to them," Aang said pleadingly, knowing if he can't convince everyone to leave, then he at least wanted to get the non-combatants out of the city. Aang is right. Your first duty is to protect the citizens of Omashu. That means making sure they aren't inside the city where they can get hurt. If you want to stay and keep fighting the Fire Nation so badly, then fine. But the least you can do is help get them out. Katara said in agreement at getting the non-combatants out of the city. It would give you the chance to focus entirely on the Fire Nation, with the citizens safely out of the city. That way, there wouldn't be any worry of them getting caught in the middle of the fighting. Sokka added, knowing that's something that should help change their minds. Young frowned at this before looking over at the refugees, seeing how many of them weren't fighters and would be caught in the crossfire if nothing was done. Fine. But that's still thousands of citizens that need to leave. How are we going to get them all out? Young said, relenting to the compromise, but knew it wouldn't be easy to get all the non-combatants out of the city. "Suckers," declared Sokka with a grin, getting confused looks from everyone at what he meant. "You're all about to come down with a nasty case of Pentapox," Sokka clarified, with Aang's and Katara's eyes widening in realization before smiling at what his plan was. Time skip one day. The next day, Sokka and Katara had managed to make all the citizens look like they were infected with Pentapox after finding and gathering enough purple Pentaposes. Before directing them to leave the city while acting sick, scaring away any guards in their way, who hastily had the gates open to let the infected people out of the city before they could be infected as well. Long stayed behind to search for Bumi, along with being able to find and to free his pet goat gorilla Flopsy during the confusion. With the two searching the entire city for the rest of the day, only to fail to find where Bumi was located, leading to them sneaking out of the city to meet up with the evacuated citizens. Both of them feeling downcast at failing to find their friend, before being greeted by Sokka and Katara when they arrived. "We looked everywhere. No Bumi," Aang said sadly, with Flopsy moaning sadly at not finding Bumi, while Katara hugged the Avatar and Sokka hugged the goat gorilla to cheer them up. "We've got a problem. We just did a head count," said Young, walking up to them, having followed them via a tunnel to ensure nothing went wrong, making the Gong look at him in worry. "Oh no. Did someone get left behind?" Katara asked, worried that someone got left behind during the evacuation. "No, we have an unwanted extra," Young replied, pointing to Momo as the Gong's eyes widening at seeing Tom Tom holding onto the flying lemur's neck. Later. After setting up a fire, the Gong kept Tom Tom with them, seeing how none of the refugees looked happy about a Fire Nation baby being with them. While Tom Tom kept trying to catch Momo, with the flying lemur quickly jumping away before Tom Tom's attention turned to Sokka's club. Falling down, the baby looked curiously before picking it up and began suckling on it, only for Sokka to take it away. "No. Bad Fire Nation baby," Sokka scolded, refusing to let his weapons be used by anyone from the Fire Nation, with Tom Tom looking at him upset at having the club taken away before he began crying. Katara looked at the crying baby before narrowing her eyes at her brother and whacked him across the face, only for Sokka to cross his arms defiantly. "Hit me all you like, Katara, I'm not putting my weapons in the hands of anyone from the Fire Nation," stated Sokka, surprising the waterbender that he was going against her. "Here you go, little guy," said Aang, handing Tom Tom his staff, making the baby smile at having a new toy, with Katara smiling at the Avatar before hugging Tom Tom. "Ooh, you're so cute," Katara cooed before kissing his cheek. "Yeah, he's real cute. I'm sure he'll be so much cuter when he's older and joins the Fire Nation army, becoming a killer just like the rest of them," stated Young, knowing he'll be a killer like the rest of the Fire Nation. "Does that look like the face of a killer to you?" questioned Katara, picking Tom Tom up to show Young, knowing that he may be from the Fire Nation, but she doubted he would be like the rest of them. While the Earthbender looked at the baby indifferently, only seeing the soldier and killer he'll grow up to become. "I'm sure Fire Lord Sazin, Aslan and Ozai were all babies, and look at what they turned into. That kid won't be any different, just another killer in a long line of them," Young said, making Aang and Katara frown that he'd compare Tom Tom to the Fire Lords. Before their attention turned to the sky when they heard a shriek, seeing a messenger hawk flying towards them before landing on a rock. "The messenger hawk," Young said, tensing at the sight of the bird, wondering if it was a trap, with Aang going over and took the message from the hawk, unrolling it to see who it was from. "It's from the Fire Nation governor. He thinks we kidnapped his son. So he wants to make a trade. His son for King Bumi," said Aang, in shock that the governor would be willing to hand over Bumi in exchange for his son, with the others being shocked as well. "You're kidding, right? They'd hand over a powerful earthbending king for a baby," Sokka said in disbelief that they'd make such a trade before wincing when Katara smacked him again. "Sokka. It's not just a baby, it's his son. Of course the governor would do anything to get him back," Katara said before turning back to Aang. "Are you going to take the deal?" questioned Katara, with the Avatar immediately nodding as he was already writing a reply. "Of course I'm going to. The governor wants his son back and we're not just going to keep as a hostage or anything. And this way we also get Bumi back, both sides will get what they want," Aang replied as went and gave the reply to the messenger hawk, which took off back to Omashu. "I don't agree with bargaining with the Fire Nation, but as long as they hand over King Bumi, they can take the kid back," said Young, only caring about retrieving Bumi while also seeing this as their chance to deal with the Fire Nation invaders as well, a chance he wasn't going to pass up. Time skip one day. Omashu. The next day Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee, June and several members of Naruto's forces had arrived in Omashu to recruit Mai, as well as meet with Governor Yukano. With Azula being annoyed when Naruto had stopped her from being carried on her palanquin. "I don't understand why I should waste time walking when I have a palanquin for a reason," Azula said in annoyance at needing to walk. "Because it's a waste of time and energy to carry something like that around. And on the more practical side, it lets you be more aware of your surroundings and prepared in the event of an attack," replied Naruto, making the Fire Princess scowl in annoyance. "Lighten up, princess, you should enjoy the exercise more. We wouldn't want to have to squeeze you into your wedding dress, now would we?" June said with a smirk, with Azula glaring murderously at her. "Did you just call me fat?" demanded Azula, wishing she could create lightning to vaporize her, while the bounty hunter shrugged nonchalantly. "You said it, not me. Though now that you mention it," said June, trailing off, with Azula growling lowly. "I don't think she's fat. The Whittle princess is just used to being carried around like a Whittle baby," one of the soldiers said in a mocking baby voice, making Azula turn to them while seeing who spoke, one of the few soldiers Naruto brought that stood out. With it being a 17-year-old girl with fair skin, short black hair and distinctly pink eyes, which are accentuated by her eyelashes running upwards at the corners. The girl wearing custom green and black armor, showing she's one of the Earthbenders in Naruto's army, with the armor also having painted red cracks on it that looked to glow in certain light. Having learned the girl's name was Kuritsuchi, one of the captains in Naruto's forces and a skilled Earthbender, at least from what Azula's heard. Along with seeming to never pass up a chance to taunt people or make sarcastic remarks. Something that grated on the Fire Princess's nerves whenever she targeted her. The only other soldiers that really stood out was another Earthbender named Chijai Akimichi, as well as two Waterbenders named Ino Yamanaka and Hakuyuki. The latter two having rather unique looks for Waterbenders, as both of them have fair skin, with Ino also having light blue eyes and platinum blonde hair, while Haku has black hair and brown eyes. And despite her prejudice against Earthbenders and Waterbenders, Azula has managed to observe their training a few times and would, begrudgingly, admit they were rather skilled. "Kuritsuchi," Naruto said while looking at the Earthbender sternly, with the pink-eyed soldier raising her hands in surrender, though gave Azula one last smirk. With the group soon arriving at the palace, where Mai stood to greet them, bowing slightly to Azula. "Please tell me you're here to kill me," Mai said hopefully, before gaining a slight smile when she looked at Azula, only to lose it at seeing her current state. The Fire Princess looking better after the circus show and Ty Lee's own performance, she still looked tired and drained of energy. Along with feeling that her inner fire was still dwindling, despite her efforts to regain her bending's former strength. Mai and Azula soon laughed at her remark and hugged each other. "It's great to see you, Mai," Azula said sincerely, getting a raised brow from the knife thrower before hugging Ty Lee as well when she rushed forward. "I thought you ran off and joined the circus. You said it was your calling." said Mai, not expecting to see Ty Lee leave the circus after running away from home. Well, I thought it was time for a career change, and I wasn't going to miss the chance to see my best friends again. Ty Lee replied, happy that they're all together again. Right. General Naruto. Mai said while nodding towards Naruto, who returned it. A pleasure to meet you. I've heard about you from Azula and Ty Lee on the way here, along with your skills in using knives. Though if you don't mind me asking, why does it seem like the city is abandoned? Naruto asked, having noticed how empty Omashu was on the way to the palace. Everyone got sick with some dumb disease called Pentapox, and my dad had them all removed from the city. But apparently it was just a cover and the resistance here kidnapped my little brother. Replied Mai, making Naruto frown while Azula scowled in annoyance. All of you spread out and search the city. Meet back here once you've finished searching. Naruto ordered while turning to his soldiers, wanting them to get a good layout of the city and see where this resistance was hiding, with all of them bowing before they began spreading throughout the city. Take us to your parents. Azula said, annoyed at the governor basically emptying the city of potential hostages, leaving them vulnerable to attacks. Later. Mai had taken them into the palace throne room, with Azula taking the throne of Omashu for herself and waited until Yukano and Michi arrived. Having them explain what happened and how the plague had appeared within the city. I apologize. You've come to Omashu at a difficult time. At noon we're making a trade with the resistance to get Tom Tom back. Yukano said, having not expected the Fire Princess and the High General to arrive, otherwise he would have put together a proper welcome. Yes, I'm sorry to hear about your son. But really, what did you expect by just letting all the citizens leave? Said Azula before standing up and glaring at the governor. My father has trusted you with this city and you're making a mess of things. Azula said, with Yukano and Michi bowing lowly to the Ravenet. Forgive me, princess. Said Yukano, with Naruto putting a hand on Azula's shoulder and stepped forward. Let this be a lesson for yourself and your men, governor. If you all had actually taken the time to look into things, you'd know that there is no such thing as Pentapox. Which doesn't even sound real, with a foolish name like that. Naruto stated, with Yukano nodding. Yes, General Naruto. I swear I'll not fall for such tricks again. Yukano replied, only to lower his head again when Azula stepped forward. If you remain in power for that long. Because of your foolishness, the city is now empty and the resistance here will be free to attack without concern. Stated Azula, only to be pulled back again by Naruto. But it's also understandable that you haven't learned everything there is to know about Omashu and its surrounding land, leaving you unaware if such a disease did in fact exist. I've encountered enemy resistances and rebellions that also utilized such tactics, faking an illness in order to sneak around uninterrupted or causing chaos among their enemies they've infected. So I'm sure you'll strive to study up on the lands you govern so such a thing doesn't happen again. Added Naruto, with Yukano quickly nodding in agreement, thankful the High General was being more forgiving than the Fire Princess. As for the hostage exchange, you, your wife and Mai will handle it. While Azula, June, Ty Lee and myself will join you to ensure no further tricks happen. My forces and your guards will also be on standby in the event the resistance tries going back on the agreement. Naruto said, much to Yukano's and Michi's gratitude and relief at having helped to get their son back. Plus with the resistance's willingness to try and assassinate Mai, Michi and Tom Tom, simply to get at Yukano. And how they would be dead if it hadn't been for the Avatar's interference, given how Mai said he was able to knock over a scaffolding by just swinging a staff, showing he's an airbender. It made Naruto rather concerned if they might try another attack during the exchange. One last order of business. There is no more Omashu. I'm renaming it in honor of my father, the city of New Ozai. Said Azula with a smirk, pleased at the new name of the city. We're not renaming Omashu, let alone renaming it something that stupid. Naruto immediately said, making the Ravenet's head snap towards him. Why not? Azula demanded in annoyance. For starters, it's pointless to rename the city when Omashu is just fine. Naruto stated, with the others nodding in agreement. New Ozai also sounds kind of egocentric. I mean, a comet is understandable since that's done almost all the time, but a city. Added Ty Lee, also not wanting the city named after the Fire Lord. And like Foxy said, it's a stupid name. Not to mention unoriginal, honestly princess, try to be a little more creative. June stated with a mocking smirk. Azula, I already hated the city, please don't give me another reason to hate it even more. Said Mai, not thinking she could hate Omashu any more than she already did, but if it was called New Ozai, then she'd be tempted to throw herself into the gorge around it. I actually rather like the name Omashu and the history behind it, it's a rather romantic tale. Michi said nervously at disagreeing with the Fire Princess, but couldn't say New Ozai was a good name. Forgive me princess, but it is rather lackluster for such a grand city and one of the last Earth Kingdom strongholds. Said Yukano as even with his loyalty to Ozai, he couldn't say it was a good name either. Alright. Fine, the city will remain Omashu," Azula said, crossing her arms while looking away in embarrassment at how no one thought the new name was good while considering it unimaginative and lackluster. "I believe that's everything. We'll meet up again when it's time for the hostage exchange," said Naruto, taking mercy on his fiancée and dismissing everyone, with Yukano, Michi and June all taking their leave, leaving Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee and Mai. But the knife thrower looking at her friends and the high general with a raised brow upon seeing how close Naruto and Azula seemed to be. Given how Mai knew if anyone else had spoken against Azula, they would be incinerated on the spot. "So, mind telling me why you are all here to begin with? And what's wrong with you?" Mai asked, looking at Azula, who frowned in annoyance. "A lot's happened," muttered Azula as she tried creating a fireball in her hand, surprising Mai upon seeing her fire wasn't blue anymore and how quickly it fizzled out. The trio began filling Mai in on everything that happened, mostly Naruto and Azula, while Ty Lee told her about when they recruited her from the circus, along with the show she put on for the Fire Princess. Which Azula furiously denied enjoying or that she even wanted to see it at all. Surprising Mai once again at seeing that Azula wasn't even being serious, being able to tell she seemed to genuinely appreciate what they did for her. Not thinking she'd ever see her friend acting like this, even more so that she's engaged to Naruto. Though Mai did feel upset at the Fire Lord for what he's done to Azula, as despite how she acted and treated them at times, Azula was still their friend. And despite her own emotionless and stoic personality, Mai did want to try and help her. "So, you're hunting the Avatar," Mai stated once they told her the reason they came to Omashu. "That's right, and both of you have the skills we could use to capture him," replied Azula, with Mai immediately nodding. "Count me in. Anything to get me out of this place. But we can leave after my brother's safe," said Mai, eager for the chance to get out of Omashu, but wanted to wait until her brother was safe. "That's acceptable. And something tells me we won't have time to capture the Avatar here. Once the trade has been made, they'll likely have an escape planned when they have King Bumi back," Naruto said, with the girls nodding in agreement, though Azula was annoyed that they wouldn't be able to capture the Avatar today. Later. Once it came time for the hostage exchange, Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee, Mai, June, Yukano and Michi headed up to the almost finished statue of Fire Lord Azai, which was surrounded by scaffolding, where the exchange would take place. With several guards and Naruto's forces being around the area, staying out of sight and waiting for any sign of treachery. With Aang, Katara and Sokka already waiting for them with the latter holding Tom Tom, allowing Aang and Katara the chance to jump into action if this was a trick. The trio tensing as they looked at June with wide eyes. "It's the crazy bounty hunter that was working with Zuko," said Sokka, not expecting to see June here as well. "What are you doing here? Are you trying to capture us again?" Katara demanded, narrowing her eyes at the woman, while remembering how she used her necklace to track them. "You kiddies can relax, I'm not after you today, anyway. Can't say anything about tomorrow, or maybe an hour from now. You did hurt my precious Nyla, and I'm known to hold a grudge," June said while putting a hand on her whip before scowling in annoyance. "That's without counting getting paralyzed and having to deal with creepy Uncle Lazy, acting like a pervert and hitting on me the entire time, until it wore off. Even longer when he kept pretending to be paralyzed. So, I can say you're pretty high on my shit list right now," added June, also upset at having to deal with Iroh holding her the entire time and trying to flirt with her. The latter comment making Naruto and Azula cover their faces in embarrassment at what Iroh had done. "The man who would have been Fire Lord and called the Dragon of the West, I don't even know why I bother anymore," Azula thought, embarrassed at what her uncle had done. "Are all wise old men secretly perverts? Because so far, I've found nothing to disprove it," said Naruto, pinching the bridge of his nose while the gong looked sheepish at the part about Iroh. Along with Aang and Katara thinking about Gyatso and Paku from Naruto's statement before furiously shaking their heads, not wanting to think about it. "Enough of this. Have you brought my son?" said Yukano, wanting to make sure they brought Tom Tom, with Aang nodding as Sokka stepped forward and showed them Tom Tom. "Tom Tom?" Michi said in relief, wanting to run forward and grab her son, but restrained herself. "He's here. We're ready to trade," Aang replied, with Yukano nodding before motioning the crane operator with a metal coffin-like cage being lowered down as the gong heard a familiar laughter and snort. "Hi, everybody," said Bumi, the cage turned revealing only his face was uncovered, showing his large grin, with Aang smiling in relief at seeing his friend, while Naruto narrowed his eyes at the king. "This guy's either as crazy as they say or he's using neutral Jing," thought Naruto, realizing why Bumi had surrendered the city and himself without a fight. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike that wouldn't end in the city being damaged or his people dying. "I'll give him one thing, he's a mad genius," Naruto thought, feeling great respect for Bumi since he had no way of knowing he'd even be spared or executed, yet took the risk anyway. "I'm sorry, but a thought just occurred to me. Do you mind?" Azula said once Bumi was lowered to the ground, making everyone look at her. "What is it, Princess Azula?" said Michi in worry, hoping she didn't do anything that'd stop them from getting their son back. "We're trading a 2-year-old for a king. A powerful earthbending king," stated Azula while looking at Bumi, who nodded his head in agreement with a grin before Naruto put a hand on her shoulder. "I know what you're trying to do and we're going through with the exchange," Naruto said sternly, making the fire princess narrow her eyes at him. "You really want to just hand over a powerful earthbender to the Avatar? Why not just start training him yourself then?" Azula retorted, not believing he'd want to go through with the trade, even if it meant the Avatar would be getting such a powerful earthbender as his teacher. "Azula, if you can't keep your word, then no one will ever believing anything you have to say. And I always keep my word. So be quiet," said Naruto, with Azula looking at him in annoyance, but relented and motioned Yukano and Michi to continue the trade, much to their relief. "Is there a problem?" Aang asked, worried at what was going on. "No. No problem, you'll return our son to us, then we shall turn King Bumi over to you," said Yukano as he and Michi walked forward, with the gong doing the same. But before they could get close enough to return Tom, several large boulders were launched into the air towards them, much to everyone's shock. Before Aang quickly swung his staff, releasing a blast of wind that destroyed the boulders, only for more to appear. "What's the meaning of this? We had a deal," Yukano said, quickly grabbing his wife and moving back to avoid being hit by the boulders. "This isn't us," Katara said quickly, shaking her head that they were involved before their eyes widened as Young and the rest of the resistance lit up on large stone platforms with several boulders on them, much to everyone's horror. "For Omashu and King Bumi," Young cried out as he and the resistance began launching boulders at the Fire Nation group, who all moved out of the way. No, not for King Bumi. King Bumi wants you all to stop right now," said Bumi, shaking his head at his men, not wanting them to do this. "Captain Young. Stop this, we were going to get Bumi back," Aang said, jumping in front of Young and his men, only for his eyes to widen when they launched boulders at him as well. "The Avatar has betrayed us. Take him down along with the rest of the Fire Nation scum," said Young, thrusting his fist forward, launching a boulder at Aang who opened up his glider and flew into the air to avoid it. "We've been betrayed," Naruto shouted before launching a blast of fire into the air, the signal to the guards and his forces to attack, with the guards rushing out and unleashing jets of fire at the resistance. Not believing what's happening, Aang flew into the air towards Bumi's cage as it was being lifted into the air, still wanting to at least save his friend. Only to cry out when a wave of fire blocked him, before freaking out when he saw Naruto propelling himself towards him. The High General flipping in the air, releasing an arc of flames at the Avatar, forcing him to fly away to avoid them, with Naruto pursuing him. "Mom, Dad. Get somewhere safe, now," said Mai, throwing some knives at the resistance members pinning them down, before she and Ty Lee rushed towards Katara and Sokka to get Tom, while Yukano and Michi nodded before they ran to hide by the scaffolding. "Same goes to you, Princess. I don't think Foxy would be happy if you died. Nyla," June called out while grabbing her whip before whistling, with Nyla leaping up from a lower level, roaring as he tackled some resistance members before striking them with his tongue, paralyzing them. With June cracking her whip at an earthbender when they tried attacking her Shirshu, wrapping her whip around their neck before pulling them in close, slamming her foot into their head. Before pulling out several Shirshu spit darts and threw them at more members of the resistance, paralyzing them as well. "I hate this," Azula thought, scowling as she was forced to stay back, knowing she can't do much without her bending. "We've got to get the baby out of here," Katara said to Sokka, not wanting the baby to get hurt with all the fighting going on around them, while Sokka was blowing on the bison whistle to call Appa. "Way ahead of ya," replied Sokka before blowing the whistle again, while keeping Tom from trying to grab it. Katara and Sokka then started running to the edge as Mai and Ty Lee ran after them, the Ravenet launching several stilettos at the siblings. With Katara quickly pulling water out of her pouch, breaking a few wooden boards, and lifted them into the air, blocking the stilettos from piercing her face. Before launching the boards at Mai, only to notice that Ty Lee was gone. Looking back, the Waterbender's eyes widened when she saw her brother trip and go skidding across the ground, coming close to falling off the ledge. With Ty Lee jumping up from a lower level, having struck Sokka in his foot to trip him, the acrobat then running towards him to get Tom. Only to cry out when Katara wrapped her water whip around her leg, pulling her back. Giving Sokka time to get back up and ran to a ladder to climb down. Tom. Michi cried out in worry at seeing her son being taken away, not caring about the danger as she ran to get him. "Michi. Don't go out there," said Yukano, running after his wife, fearful of her getting injured or worse. Only for his eyes to widen as he saw more boulders being launched into the air, the governor quickly running and grabbing his wife, pulling her back towards the scaffolding. "No. Let go, we have to get Tom before they screamed Michi when one of the boulders crashed through the scaffolding, forcing the couple to keep moving as more boulders crashed down around them. The two looking around fearfully as they had to keep changing the direction they were going as more boulders crashed down around them. Before their eyes widened as the scaffolding started coming down from the damage to it, crying out when a metal bar fell on top of them. Which got Mai's attention, the girl's eyes widening when she saw her parents pinned down under the collapsing scaffolding. "Mom. Dad." Mai shouted, rushing to go and help them, only to be forced to jump back when a resistance member launched a boulder at her before stomping on the ground, creating stone pillar that rushed towards the knife thrower. Jumping out of the way, Mai launched several stilettos at the resistance member, pinning them to the ground before turning back towards her parents. Only for her eyes to widen in horror as the scaffolding completely fell down, right on top of them. "No!" screamed Mai in horror at her parents being crushed, with the fighting momentarily stopping from the sudden crash. The Fire Nation sighed and Gong looking in shock and horror at what just happened, with Tom Tom crying out in Sokka's arms, tears in his eyes, and trying to reach out to where his parents were. "Oh man." Sokka muttered, not believing what just happened, with Katara covering her mouth in horror. No one muttered in horror, not wanting this to happen. "We did it, man. The governor is dead, now it's time to drive the rest of the Fire Nation from Ga." Young said to rally the resistance members only to cry out when a knife was buried in his shoulder, with Mai glaring at him murderously with tears in her eyes. "You want the city so much then you can die in it," exclaimed Mai while throwing multiple knives at Young and the resistance members, everyone being aimed at their heads, throats or hearts, most of them finding their mark and killing several resistance members, while others were lucky to get out of the way. "Katara. We need to," Sokka said, knowing they needed to get out of here more than ever, only to be cut off when he was suddenly ensnared by several water tendrils, with one grabbing Tom Tom, pulling him towards one of Naruto's waterbenders, much to Katara's shock at seeing waterbenders. "What? Waterbenders, what are they?" said Katara, only to be forced to raise a shield of ice when dozens of ice spikes were launched at her by Haku. "Let the baby out of here, now." Haku ordered the waterbender, who nodded before creating a wave of water to ride away with Tom Tom. "What are you doing? We're on your side," Katara said, not believing they were being attacked by waterbenders, only for Haku to wave her arms pulling water out of the air and freezing it into ice claws on her fingers which she launched at Katara. "Yet you broke your end of the deal, and now Governor Yukano and his wife are dead. I don't see how any of you are on my side," stated Haku, much to Katara's shock before she moved out of the way of the ice claws. "You're with the Fire Nation, but they destroyed the Southern Water Tribe, attacked the Northern Water Tribe, tried to kill the Moon Spirit," said Katara, launching a water whip at Haku, only for her to pull more water from the air, creating several water rings that sliced through her water whip. "All of which was done by men who are now dead," Haku retorted before creating several ice spears she launched to Katara, with the southern waterbender creating an ice shield, blocking the spears. "The Fire Nation is still evil. They've been trying to control the world for 100 years, just look at what they did to Omashu," Katara argued, only to gasp when a water tendril wrapped around her neck from behind and slammed her into the ground. "Yet you're the ones that betrayed us. You were going to get King Bumi back, but instead you attacked us. Now that baby you seemed so eager to protect is an orphan along with his sister. I think you're confusing who's evil here. And for the record, General Naruto's treated us with nothing but kindness, respect, and fairness. All of which we've returned and have no intention of betraying," said Ino before rotating her hands and sent Katara skidding across the ground. Getting up, Katara looked at the two waterbenders nervously, with Haku forming ice needles in between her fingers, while Ino covered her arms in water that split into multiple tendrils. But before they could attack, Katara gasped in pain when she was struck several times in her back and her arms, knocking her back, showing Ty Lee behind her. "That was for Mai," Ty Lee said as she glared at Katara, who quickly tried creating a water whip, only to be terrified when she saw she couldn't bend. Moving out of the way when Ino stabbed her water tendrils down where she was, Katara began running as quickly as she could, knowing she's helpless against them without her bending. Meanwhile, the resistance members were now being pushed back as Mai didn't let up and taking them down with her knives and stilettos. Along with pulling out her foldable sai and stabbing any earthbenders that got too close. The Ravenet not letting up and killing as many of the resistance members as she could. "She's just one girl. Attack her all at once," Young shouted, rallying the resistance before they all stomped on the ground, creating several stone pillars. The earthbenders punched the pillars, launching multiple earth discs at Mai, who ducked and dodged around them, while still throwing her knives and stilettos. Only to grit her teeth when one of the discs connected with her shoulder, feeling it dislocate her arm. With the resistance members doubling their efforts, breaking the pillars down and unleashing a barrage of rock fragments at Mai. But before the fragments could hit Mai, a massive boulder fell down in front of her blocking them, with the boulder then suddenly began spinning around. the sight shocking the resistance members before they were forced to move out of the way when the boulder began launching rocks at them. Only for the boulder to start chasing them down and continue launching rocks that shattered bones on impact. Before suddenly, someone burst out of the boulder into the air, letting out a shout as they descended and slammed their fists down on the boulder. The impact caused the boulder to explode, unleashing a hail of rocks at the resistance members. But the person being revealed to be Chimjai, who slammed his fists into the ground, pulling them back up, showing they were now covered in large rocks gauntlets. "Come on. I'll take you all down," Chimjai shouted, swinging his fists around, releasing rock spikes at the resistance members. An Earthbender said, young in shock and disbelief, with the rest of the resistance also being shocked that an Earthbender was working with the Fire Nation, before several resistance members fell to the ground as several earth pillars shot up and slammed into the side of their heads. "He's not the only one," Kuritsuchi said, emerging from the ground before stomping on the ground and creating several earth spikes that shot up towards the resistance members. "Sorry we're late, we needed to take care of your friends down below and keep them from launching any more boulders," said Kuritsuchi with a smirk, having dealt with the Earthbenders that were launching the boulders into the air. "You traitors. You'd side with the Fire Nation after everything they've done to the Earth Kingdom," Young yelled in anger that they'd sided with the Fire Nation before grunting in pain when Chimjai launched one of his stone gauntlets at the captain's back. "You're the traitors. Going back on the deal when you were going to get your king back," retorted Chimjai while creating another gauntlet, with Kuritsuchi stomping her foot on the ground lifting up several rocks. "You could have all just left the city peacefully, but you just had to double-cross us. Now everyone here that dies, it'll be on your heads. But unlike you, we don't betray our comrades, and right now, the general wants you to burn," said Kuritsuchi as her smirk widened before she began grinding the rocks together, with the resistance members being shocked when the rocks were heated until they turned into lava, which Kuritsuchi morphed into several shuriken. Before the lavabender launched her shurikens at the resistance members, who quickly raised a stone shield, only for the lava shurikens to slice through it and them. With Kuritsuchi then slamming her hands on the ground, causing an eruption of lava that rushed towards the resistance members. The pink-eyed soldier smirking as they were forced to run to avoid the approaching lava. While Chimjai curled up into a ball and covered himself in another boulder, rolling after the resistance members. "You good?" Kuritsuchi asked while looking at Mai, who held her shoulder before grunting as she slammed it into one of the earth pillar, popping it back into the socket. "I will be once they're all dead," stated Mai, pulling out her knives and rushed after the resistance members. At another part of the platform, June was now riding on Nyla, throwing several darts at resistance members to paralyze them. Or wrapping her whip around them and throwing them against the walls, or pulling them in close to knock them out. While Nyla ripped apart any rocks thrown at them with his claws before striking the resistance members with his tongue to paralyze them. "Come on Nyla. I want to take as many of these guys down before Knife Girl there kills everyone," June said with a smirk, eager to incapacitate and capture the Earthbenders before Mai can kill them, knowing each of them would fetch a nice price. Up above the fighting, Aang looked down in shock, despair and horror at seeing people dying on both sides, having not wanted any of this to happen. Before the Avatar cried out when he was hit by a blast of fire, sending him crashing into the scaffolding. But Aang quickly righting himself and skidded across the platform, seeing Naruto floating in the air before cutting off his flames, creating 2 fire whips as he walked towards Aang. "Please, I didn't know this would happen," Aang said before releasing a blast of air when Naruto launched one of the whips at him, slicing through the wood. "I thought air nomads were peaceful and didn't tell lies, but I suppose being the Avatar makes you an exception," retorted Naruto, swinging the second whip at Aang, cutting through the wood and metal framing. "I'm not lying. We had no idea Captain Young intended to attack. Please just listen, we can end this before anyone else dies," pleaded Aang, only to bend backwards as a whip came dangerously close to taking his head off. "Yeah, we can end this. Just know, we were going to give you King Bumi, now you'll see what I do to liars and traitors," Naruto said before having the fire whip shrunk down until there were many fireballs in each of his hands. The whiskered firebender throwing his hands forward, unleashing 2 explosions of fire that rushed towards Aang, whose eyes widened before he began spinning his staff to keep the flames back. Before Naruto propelled himself above the explosions, launching himself at Aang with his hand held back with a firebomb in his hand. The Avatar quickly inhaled deeply before releasing a powerful gust of wind to his side, launching himself away. Just in time as Naruto slammed his hand down on the platform, releasing a massive explosion of fire that incinerated the scaffolding platforms and melted the metal frames down below. Though Aang was shocked when Naruto dragged his hand across the platform before thrusting his arm up, creating pillars of flames heading towards him. Opening up his glider, Aang quickly flew into the air, with Naruto shooting fire out of his hands and feet, flying after the Avatar. Shooting multiple fireballs after Aang, the Avatar closed his glider for a moment and turned around, swinging the staff releasing a wave of compressed air that cut through the fireballs. With Naruto flipping over it, swinging his legs at Aang, and releasing arcs of flames at him. With Aang rotating his arms as he compressed the air around him, forming an air sphere as the flames hit and dispersed on impact. Seeing this, Naruto increased the power of flames from his hands and feet, propelling himself at high speed towards Aang, before maneuvering himself to start flying around the Avatar. Aang's eyes widening as Naruto began leaving behind a trail of flames around him, flying faster and faster until he stopped in front of Aang and gathered the fire into a large pressurized ball. With the High General giving a shout as he launched the fireball at Aang. With the Avatar inhaling deeply and absorbing his air sphere before unleashing a powerful gale force winds. The attacks colliding together, with the fireball releasing a massive explosion of flames, the sight shocking Aang at the large amount of fire. Before he began free-falling until he opened up his glider, looking back to see Naruto chasing after him, making the Avatar nervous as he began flying faster. Back on the ground, Azula had moved away from the fighting, looking around in shock at everything happening, those dying on either side. Along with Mai not hesitating in killing the resistance members after her parents were crushed. Having never thought the battlefield could be this chaotic and dangerous. Looking around, the Fire Princess saw Mai still cutting down resistance members without hesitation, while June and Nile were paralyzing or knocking out any in their way, and Naruto's forces were taking down even more. Wait, where's Ty Lee? Thought Azula, looking around for any sign of the Kai blocker, mentally sighing in relief at seeing her busy Kai blocking more Earthbenders while flipping around and avoiding their attacks. Only for her eyes to widen when she spotted an Earthbender lifting up a boulder and aiming it right at Ty Lee, while her back is turned. The Ravenet not even thinking before she ran to get her friend out of the way, only for the resistance member to launch the boulder at Ty Lee, making Azula afraid that she was going to be hit. Ty Lee. Azula shouted, getting the brunette's attention, with Ty Lee looking at her in surprise before her eyes widened at the shadow behind her, turning to see the boulder flying towards her, not having time to avoid it entirely. The sight now terrifying Azula, knowing she'd be hit and crushed by the rock, something that scared her even more, not wanting to see her be hurt or killed. Remembering the show she'd put on just for her, promising that she'd be there for her from now on. And now this Earthbender thought that they could kill her. Acting on instinct, Azula tried shooting fire out of her hands and feet to propel herself towards Ty Lee, not even having time to be shocked as blue flames shot out of her. The Fire Princess getting in front of the acrobat, shocked Ty Lee at seeing her fire, before holding her hand out with her index and middle finger extended. Unleashing a blast of fire that shattered the boulder, with Azula then manipulating the flames into a pinwheel she launched at the Earthbender. The wheel of fire slicing the resistance member right down the middle. Azula, your fire, it's backhand and you saved me, Ty Lee said in shock that not only Azula's fire was back, but that she'd saved her as well. Of course I did. The only one who gets to push you around is me, let alone these fools. Retorted Azula while holding up her hand, smirking eagerly at the familiar blue flames. Before swiping her arms up through the air, releasing a wave of fire at a group of resistance members, incinerating them on the spot. Now they'll see what real firebending is. Thought Azula, pleased at having her fire back. Meanwhile, Young could only look around helplessly, angry and worried at how badly the battle was going for them, knowing if something isn't done soon, then they would all end up dead or captured. Men. Take out the ground beneath them. We'll bury them all within Omashu. Young said, gathering up most of the still standing resistance members as they ran to get some higher ground. Going up to the level above the battle, the Earthbenders all jumped up before stomping on the ground, thrusting their arms forward before throwing them back. Causing the ground to begin shaking, before they stomped on the ground again to start breaking open the level everyone was on. Just a little more. Said Young, knowing the ground would break open any moment now, before they slammed their fists down on the ground, causing a mini earthquake. Only for everyone to stop when they heard a creaking sound, before looking up in horror at seeing the statue of Ozai had been destabilized and was now falling down straight towards them. Everyone, move now. Naruto shouted to his forces, as they all quickly began scattering. Katara. Yelled Sokka from on top of Appa, having been able to slip away to get to the bison before flying low and pulled his sister up, knowing they needed to escape. Aang. We need to go now. Katara said, looking up at Aang, the Avatar looking at her before looking back at the collapsing statue, his eyes widening in terror at seeing Bumi's cage was right in its path. No. Aang shouted, quickly flying at Bumi, refusing to let his friend be crushed, only to cry out when a rock hit him in the side, knocking him down to the ground. Looking up, Aang could only look in horror as the statue collapsed on top of his friend's cage, much to the horror of the rest of the Gong and resistance. Bumi. Cried Aang, rushing forward to the Rekage, hoping and begging that he somehow survived, while Young fell to his knees in shock and horror. What have I done? I didn't mean for this to happen." Young muttered in horror and despair, realizing what he's become in his desperation to take back Omashu, only to end up getting his king killed. Before he was struck by Nyla's tongue as June and Ty Lee took out the rest of his men, the two looking at the Rekage with frowns on their faces. "What a fucking waste," muttered June, unable to help but feel pity as Aang ran towards the Rekage and began blowing it away. Bumi. 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 Come on Bumi, say something. Anything. Please." Aang begged, searching for where his friend was, refusing to believe he was dead. Only to freeze as he blew away some debris, the Avatar shaking as he fell to his knees when he saw a bloodied hand sticking up from it. "No no." Aang cried out with tears in his eyes, seeing that the only living friend he had left was now dead. Though soon Aang's sadness, pain and despair turned into pure rage and anger as his tattoos began glowing, his head snapping back towards everyone else, showing his glowing tear-filled eyes. Before Aang began floating into the air with hurricane force winds blowing around him. With an air sphere forming around him followed by a tornado wrapping around the enraged Avatar. Until Aang threw his arm out, unleashing a giant pressurized blast of air that ripped through the ground and anyone in its path, while those within close proximity were sent flying through the air. Throwing his other arm out, Aang released another blast of air at his other side, taking out even more people and sending others flying. Before he began rotating his arms, causing the tornado to spin faster and faster until he raised his arm into the air, with the tornado going up as well. Aang then sliced his arm down, causing the tornado to turn and head straight towards the ground, slamming into it, crushing, and destroying everything it hit or was close to. With everyone quickly running to get as far away as they could from the Avatar, seeing he was attacking both the Omashu resistance and those affiliated with the Fire Nation alike. Though Aang's rampage was stopped when Naruto fired a blast of fire at him, with Aang moving his hand and increasing the pressure of the wind from where the fire was coming from. Turning his head to glare at Naruto, who shot more fireballs at him, the Avatar merely swinging his arm out and releasing a wave of wind that cut through the flames. Propelling himself out of the way, Naruto flew around Aang, shooting more and more fireballs at the Avatar, until Aang flew after him. Being able to reach Naruto by negating the wind resistance on him, before slicing his arms through the air, releasing several air blades at the High General. With Naruto immediately shooting himself off to the side, narrowly dodging the air blades. With the whiskered firebender spinning in the air until he was facing Aang, thrusting his fist forward, creating a flame at the end of fist, releasing an explosive burst of fire at Aang. The explosion managing to throw Aang out of his air sphere and back to the ground, with Naruto acting quickly and flew after him. Landing on the ground, Naruto began propelling himself around Aang as fast as he could, augmenting his flames as they began growing hotter and more intense. Until soon a massive fire vortex was swirling around the Avatar. Naruto taking a moment to look at his flames, surprised when he saw hints of purple and green in the vortex. What the was that, Naruto thought before quickly shaking his head and focused back on the enraged Avatar. With Aang scowling before he began spinning around at high speed, forming a cocoon of wind around himself, which continued growing bigger and bigger until it turned into a tornado. As the Avatar then flew up before diving right back down on the ground, slamming his hand down. The impact causing the wind to disperse into a massive hurricane, which also dispersed the fiery vortex around him. With Naruto having gotten out of the way when he saw Aang jump up, managing to avoid being hit by the blast. Before the High General began rotating his arms, creating trails of lightning just as Aang turned his attention back towards him. Thrusting his hand forward, Naruto fired a blast of lightning at the Avatar's feet, throwing him through the air before catching himself. But before Aang could attack Naruto again, he grunted as he was struck several times in the back and fell to the ground, his tattoos losing their glow with Ty Lee looking down at him in shock and disbelief. "Did I just take down the Avatar?" Ty Lee said, not expecting her Kai blocking to work on the Avatar when he was in the Avatar state. The Kai blocker yelped when Naruto propelled himself forward, grabbing the brunette just as Appa landed on ground, bellowing loudly at everyone. While Sokka and Katara hastily grabbed Aang before climbing back onto the bison. Go, 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 go. Yip, yip, now. Sokka shouted, grabbing the reins and urging Appa to fly off, with the sky bison shooting up into the air and flew away. Later. The battle ended with great losses on both sides, with the resistance, guards, and soldiers all being nearly wiped out, while the resistance members still alive were rounded up. With the remaining guards and soldiers being tended to and collecting the bodies of the fallen. While Naruto looked at all the destruction mournfully, having hoped this wouldn't happen, let alone on a scale like this. Before looking over his shoulder at Azula, June and Ty Lee as the three approached him. "How are you three holding up?" Naruto asked, glad they along with Mai, Tom, Kuritsuchi, Ino, Haku and Shinji survived the battle. "We should be asking you that. You're the one dumb enough to try fighting the Avatar when he was that angry," said June, though one could hear the concern in her voice, while Naruto shrugged. Wasn't trying to fight him, just doing what I could to keep his attention on me and knock him out of the Avatar state. Good job by the way, Ty Lee," said Naruto, nodding at the brunette, who nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, I'm glad I could help," Ty Lee replied, still shaken by everything that happened and then seeing the Avatar in such a state and the power he had with just one element. "What about you, Azula?" questioned Naruto, looking at his fiancée, who also looked slightly shaken. It's not what I expected. It was just madness everywhere and so much death," Azula replied, looking around, having only heard about glorious Fire Nation's victories and those that died fighting for their homeland, but she didn't see anything glorious about this. "Death is never easy, whether it's that of an ally," said Naruto, looking over at a tearful Mai comforting a crying Tom Tom, while their parents' bodies were collected to be taken for a proper burial. "Or an enemy. It's something I hate seeing every time I see it, but no, there's nothing I can do about it. Only hoping to end things peacefully or quickly if it comes to a fight," Naruto said, making the trio look at him. "Why do you even do this? You don't enjoy killing and you try to find peaceful solutions. Why do you even stay in the army?" June asked, with Azula and Ty Lee also wanting to know this, since Naruto didn't seem like he was suited for being in the Fire Army. "HMPH, you already know I'm not like the majority of the Fire Army, that's because I was an orphan, a street urchin really. I didn't go to some school or grow up with a family spouting propaganda bullshit that everyone else is told. The only thing I cared about was surviving and being able to support myself. When I learned I was a firebender, I saw an easy way in joining the army. But I didn't have the money to enroll into the military academy or the talent to get sponsored, that is until I was trained by my masters. Then I returned, I was able to get sponsored and enrolled into the academy, then graduated when I was 13, now having a means to support myself, and if I earned a reputation, that'd just be a bonus," Naruto explained, surprising the three at hearing why he joined the Fire Army. "What changed?" questioned Ty Lee, having seen how Naruto interacts with his forces on the ship and seeing the genuine sadness for those that died. "I learned more about the war. Like I said, I didn't attend any school, so I didn't know anything about the war, only seeing it as a means to support myself. But after joining the academy, I did learn more, that it was started as a means to spread the Fire Nation's prosperity to the other nations, to unite them all together, rather than having them live separately. And I liked it, the idea of helping unite the world and make it better for everyone. What I don't like is how the war's gone from spreading our prosperity to simply global conquest and eliminating all obstacle, like wiping out the air nomads and raiding the Southern Water Tribe, as well as other atrocities that I didn't agree with. But I stayed, knowing I was the only one who seemed to actually care about making allies with the other nations, rather than conquer them, and I was the only one who believed in choosing peaceful solutions over more fighting. Not everyone agreed with my views, but they also can't argue with the results," said Naruto before turning to look at them. "That's why I stay with the Fire Army, because I truly believe in the goal of this war, to unite the nations and help them grow and evolve by working together. And I also can't leave, not until this war has ended. Because if I leave, then the friends, allies, enemies, everyone that's died during this war, they'd have all died for nothing. And I'm not going to let their deaths mean nothing, not when I can help ensure this war ends before more people die," Naruto said, with the three looking at him with wide eyes, before June laughed lightly. "Just when I think I have you figured out, you go and surprise me again. Don't think you'll be getting rid of me anytime soon, Foxy," said June while winking at him before leaving to go grab some of the Earthbenders to cash them in. "I think that's really amazing, Naruto. You're a really good person and I'm happy I get the chance to work with you," Ty Lee said, smiling at Naruto before hugging him, with her then going over to Mai to comfort her and Tom Tom. "And what do you think?" Naruto asked, looking at Azula, who looked unsure after everything he said. I don't know what to think," muttered Azula, with Naruto nodding and putting a hand on her shoulder. "At the time, Azula, I'm sure you'll figure things out on your own, but I'm always here for you if you ever need anything," said Naruto, the Fire Princess nodding slowly in response. "I also heard your firebending is back," Naruto stated, making Azula frown and hold up her hand, creating a fireball, only for it to once again be orange and fizzled out. "I did, but it's gone again," Azula replied, upset that she lost her firebending again. "Well, what were you doing when it came back?" questioned Naruto, wondering what she must have been feeling at the time. "I was watching the fighting, everything go on before I saw Ty Lee about to be hit and then I ran towards her. I didn't think about anything else, but wanting to save her I remembered her show and her promise, then I was just firebending like I always do. But then it was gone again once the fighting ended," explained Azula, causing the whiskered firebender to smile at hearing this, which made the Ravenette frown at him. Looking at her hands, Azula wondered why she was able to firebend to save Ty Lee, but now she couldn't anymore. "You know why it came back, don't you?" Azula said accusingly. "Maybe. But this is a lesson you'll have to learn on your own, Azula. but I have faith that you'll figure it out, eventually. Naruto said, smiling at the Fire Princess, who quickly looked away from him. I hope you realize once we're married, I can control if you get to share my bed or not. Stated Azula, making Naruto smirk. Already thinking about being in bed with me, Azula? At least wait until we've had dinner first. Naruto said teasingly, with the Ravenet glaring at him with a faint blush before quickly walking away. Chuckling at the sight, Naruto turned forward again before frowning as he created a flame in his hand, seeing it was the normal orange, with no other colors in it. Was that really what I thought it was, or was my mind just messing with me? Naruto wondered before extinguishing the flame. But the gong. Meanwhile the gong had returned to the refugee camp, with Aang having woken up not long after only to immediately start crying his eyes out, while a teary-eyed Katara comforted him. It's all my fault Bumi's dead because of me. Aang cried, blaming himself for Bumi's death and not trying harder to stop the fighting, then losing control in the Avatar state and causing even more damage. It's not your fault Aang, none of this is your fault. You wanted to save Bumi more than anyone, Captain Young is the one that ruined the exchange, he's the one that caused this. Said Katara, with Momo climbing onto Aang's shoulder and nuzzled against him, chirping softly. With Appa and Flopsy laying around offering their own comfort as well, while also being just as devastated at Bumi's death as Aang was. It is his fault. One of the refugees shouted, glaring at Aang, along with a few others. King Bumi would still be alive if the Avatar never showed up. Yelled another refugee. Everything was fine until you ruined it with that Fire Nation baby. Another refugee added, with their words only worsening Aang's guilt and self-loathing, while Katara and Sokka glared at the refugees. Hey. Can't you see he's already blaming himself, he just watched one of the last and oldest friends he had left die. Aang doesn't need all of you making him feel even worse. Shouted Sokka in his friend's defense. He's right. The Avatar truly wished to save King Bumi, he couldn't have foreseen what would happen or ever wished for his death. Said one of the more emotionally mature refugees, getting the others to calm down. You have our apologies, but everyone here cared for King Bumi greatly, and to learn of his death it's hard for all of us to think clearly. Another refugee said, with Katara nodding. We understand, Bumi was Aang's friend, and he's heard more than anyone that he's dead and that he couldn't save him. Replied Katara. But it may also be best if you all left Omashu and never returned. Said the first refugee, making the gong's eyes widened at hearing. Agreed. Well we understand you have lost King Bumi as well, but he was our leader. We put our faith in him to do what he thought was best for Omashu, but now he's dead. Another refugee added. Perhaps it's our own fault as well, for putting too much faith in the Avatar. Believing they could solve everything for us. Said another refugee, making Aang flinch before standing up. Oh okay, we'll leave Omashu and we won't return. I'm sorry for not doing more. Aang said before hugging Flopsy and jumping up onto Appa, with Katara and Sokka doing the same as the bison flew off once they were all on board. Later. Naruto stood at the gates of Omashu as all the refugees that left the city were now willingly returning, all of them simply wanting to go back home. Only for them to stop when they saw Naruto, worried and afraid the Fire Nation was going to retaliate against them. You don't have to be worried, I'm not here to fight innocent people. I am General Naruto of the Fire Army, and my words may mean nothing to all of you. But I am truly sorry for what has happened here today, and I swear that the Fire Nation did not start this, though we were forced to finish it. The ones behind this attack was Captain Young and his resistance, the men who claimed to seek to liberate Omashu, were the ones to kill King Bumi in their refusal to negotiate. King Bumi was going to be released in exchange for Governor Yukano's son, but now he is dead as well as the governor and his wife, along with numerous other good men and women. I may not have known King Bumi, but you all did and he knew all of you. It's why he chose to surrender himself, so that Omashu would not suffer by choosing to fight. Even when Captain Young and his men attacked, King Bumi tried ordering them to stand down, but they did not listen. I know none of you may care, but I am truly sorry and wish this hadn't happened. All I can do now is give you all the chance to return to your homes. As well as pay your respects to King Bumi, who will be given a proper farewell deserving of a king of Omashu and laid to rest within the royal tombs. Said Naruto, looking over the refugees, who were all surprised at his kind offer and sincere words. But the refugees trading looks with each other and muttering amongst themselves until they finally walked forward. We don't want any more fighting, we just want to go home. One of the refugees said, with everyone nodding in agreement, all of them simply wanting to return home and pay their respects to their king. Nodding at this, Naruto stepped in motion forward as the gates opened, allowing the refugees to return to Omashu and their homes. Later. After ensuring Bumi was laid to rest, Naruto and the others had returned to the royal sloop, with the addition of Mai and Tom Tom. Do you have any other family? Naruto asked as he, Azula and Ty Lee stood beside Mai, while watching Tom Tom be entertained by Ino and Haku with their waterbending. We have our Aunt Mura, who owns a flower shop in the Fire Nation, while our uncle is the warden of the Boiling Rock. But Tom's staying with me, I don't plan to let him out of my sight anytime soon," replied Mai, not wanting to leave her brother anywhere. "Don't worry Mai, we'll help you look after him," Ty Lee assured, with the knife thrower nodding in response. "Do you still wish to help us hunt down the Avatar? You'd be more than welcome to just remain on the ship while we handle it," said Azula, willing to let Mai stay on the sidelines with her brother, only to see her expression darken. "No, I'm still going to help. And I'm going to make the Avatar pay," Mai said, refusing to ever forgive the Avatar for what he's done, getting her parents killed and nearly getting Tom killed as well with his rampage. Before looking at Naruto and Azula when they put their hands on her shoulder while Ty Lee hugged her, reluctantly returning the hug, but nodded in thanks for their support. While looking at her brother, swearing to make sure nothing happens to him. But the gong. Meanwhile, the gong were flying silently on Appa, none of them knowing what to say, while Aang was still devastated by Bumi's death. The Avatar now questioning everything he's fighting for, if it lead to the death of one of his oldest and still living friends. One he can't even say goodbye to now, since he couldn't return to Omashu. But Katara, Sokka, Momo and Appa all feeling Aang's sadness and pain, while being saddened as well by the state he's in. "Katara. Are we really the good guys?" Sokka asked, looking at his sister, beginning to question his bias towards the Fire Nation after the actions of Young and his men, as well as the consequences of said actions. Knowing that no matter which way he looked at it, this time the Fire Nation were the victims rather than the murderous monsters. I don't really know what to believe anymore," replied Katara, still shaken at seeing Waterbenders and Earthbender fighting for the Fire Nation, hearing that their general treated them with kindness and fairness, with them being loyal to him. But Aang merely kept flying silently, hearing what his friends were saying, and honestly, even he didn't know if he was a good guy anymore. That's a difficult question to answer, Aang. In war, no one is truly the good guy or the bad guy, with it mostly consisting of good people fighting for their homes and what they believe in. But rest assured, if there's anyone that can truly be called the bad guy in all this, it's Fire Lord Ozai," said a familiar voice. With Aang's head snapping up, his eyes widening with tears gathering in them when he saw Bumi in front of him, sporting a light, solemn smile. "Ibu Bumi," Aang said, hesitantly and hopefully, with the deceased king smiling at his old friend. "It's still good to see again Aang, no matter the circumstances," Bumi replied, making Aang choke slightly with a tearful smile. It's good to see you too. You're a spirit now, aren't you?" Aang stated sadly, with Bumi nodding in response. "Yep, but before I can start spreading my genius to the spirit world, I wanted to see you one last time and tell you, don't blame yourself, Aang. And even if you do keep blaming yourself, I forgive you," said Bumi, surprising the Avatar before he shook his head. "You shouldn't, you're dead because of me." "If only I had," Aang said, only for Bumi to stop him. "I would have stopped you. After all, who do you think bent that rock at you before you could reach me?" Bumi said before he began laughing madly, much to Aang's shock. That was you? You could earthbend the entire time," said Aang, hurt and upset that his friend could have escaped but chose not to. "Of course, they didn't cover my face after all. But please, listen Aang, I don't have long before I cross over. The reason I surrendered was because I was employing neutral Jing. You know that there's positive Jing when you're attacking, as well as negative Jing when you're retreating. But there is also neutral Jing, when you do nothing. Neutral Jing is the key to earthbending. It involves listening and waiting for the right moment to strike. It's why I surrendered, I was waiting for the right moment to strike, but it seems I never got the right moment. That is who your earthbending master will be. Your teacher will be someone who has mastered neutral Jing. You need to find someone who waits and listens before striking," Bumi explained, with Aang nodding slowly. But why, though? Why wouldn't you let me save you?" Aang asked sadly, making Bumi frown and sigh. "You wouldn't have been able to free me in time, Aang. We both know it, the only thing you would have done is gotten yourself crushed along with me. And the world still needs you, not just the Avatar, but you Aang. Upon my death, I had a vision. One that showed that you and that young general you fought, Naruto, are the key to finally putting an end to this war," Bumi said with Aang looking at him curiously. "Naruto?" Aang muttered, remembering the said firebender while being able to sense that despite being with the Fire Nation, he wasn't a bad person. "He will be your rival in this war, Aang. With this war now becoming a conflict of preserving the old ways of balance or serving as the catalyst for a revolution to create something new. With the outcome depending on the both of you and your actions," said Bumi. "But how? How will know what I'm supposed to do?" Aang asked, hoping his friend will be able to help show him figure out what he's supposed to do. "I'm afraid that's something you'll need to discover on your own, Aang. Just believe in yourself, that's all anyone can do, even the Avatar. Believe in yourself and do what you know is right. And most importantly, never doubt yourself or those closest to you, Aang," replied Bumi, making the Avatar nod and smile at him sadly before the king of Omashu disappeared. Having crossed over into the spirit world. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye.